Chapter 1580. Bright Flame Heavenly King, Zhao Kongyan. Because Tianyang wanted a deal with Sheng Qingzi of the ancient Tao sect, the vast expanse Sacred Spirit had used many of Haoman's books to provide Tianyang with information. The 20 participating Sky Prides of the ancient Tao sect were just SOSO. They were not even worth a single move from Tianyang. However, there were a few that Tianyang needed to pay attention to. One of them was the Bright Flame Heavenly King, ranked third in the ancient Tao sect. Bright Flame Heavenly King, Zhao Kongyan. You know who I am? Zhao Kongyan, who looked like a flame giant, said in a low voice. Then, aren't you going to hurry up and die? Then, that incomparably huge body disappeared from the spot, as if it had never existed. In the next moment, layers upon layers of fire seals surrounded Heavenly Sun's head, feet, front, back, left, and right. Kill! The crimson, azure, and dark green flame seals blasted towards the Heavenly Sun. I've long heard that the Bright Flame Heavenly King's bright flame kingly body can control all the flames in the world. It seems like it's true. Tianyang chuckled. He did not panic at all in the face of the countless flame seals. These things can't be formed in an instant. It seems like you've made a lot of secret moves in the battle with me. Tianyang chuckled. Bright Flame Heavenly King, Zhao Kongyan, laughed coldly. That's right, and you fell for it. Now you can die. Boom, 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 boom. Countless flame seals blasted towards Zhao Kongyan like a storm. Amidst the countless explosions, not a trace of the Heavenly Sun Man could be seen. He must have been blasted into ashes. To be able to make senior brother Sheng Qingzi so angry, I thought he would be on par with the strongest Sky Prides of the 3 sections. I didn't expect him to be this weak. Zhao Kongyan shook his head. Although my bright flame kingly body can control all the flames, it's not easy to set up so many flame seals. Setting them up in the middle of a battle is almost the limit. I didn't expect that he would fall for it. This guy is really stupid. Zhao Kongyan sighed. Now, the soul-cleansing snow lotus belongs to me. Zhao Kongyan turned to look at the land where the spirit-cleansing snow lotus had grown. However, when he swept his gaze over them, he saw that they were in a daze. Where was the soul-cleansing snow lotus? Even the top of the mountain was a few meters shorter. He directly took the soil away. Seeing this, Zhao Kongyan's expression changed greatly. That was a treasure that could purify the nascent soul and increase the success rate of condensing the soul. In terms of value, it was second only to the extreme flame lotus. Damn it! Zhao Kongyan immediately looked at the flame seal that was still exploding. His figure flashed, and he once again released layers of flames, turning himself into a flame giant. He rushed towards the center of the attack. Whoosh! At this moment, a cold light shot out from within. The flames all over Zhao Kongyan's body began to tremble violently as his pupils rapidly contracted. 3 ninth-grade spiritual fires had erupted at the same time. At the same time, Zhao Kongyan's face was filled with disbelief. What was going on? Boom! However, even though Zhao Kongyan's reaction was fast enough, it was still difficult to block the flying sword that had been charging for a long time. With one blow, his entire radiant flame kingly body collapsed, and Zhao Kongyan himself spat out a mouthful of blood. Thanks to the strength of the 3 ninth-grade spiritual fires and the protective Dharma treasure, he was not directly decapitated. I underestimated the indestructible body. 2 black flames with completely different auras erupted at the center of the explosion. Like a pair of wings, they flattened the violent explosion. Tianyang stood in the air, looking at his body that was only damaged in his robe, and chuckled. How did you? Zhao Kongyan's expression changed drastically as he looked at Tianyang walking out of the explosion in disbelief. I thought I would at least lose a layer of skin or something. I didn't expect the indestructible body to take it all. As Tianyang moved forward, his slightly damaged skin rapidly recovered to its original state. Apart from the robe he had just put on, which proved that Tianyang had withstood an earth-shattering explosion, everything else was as if nothing had happened. Now, while Zhao Kongyan was still in shock, Tianyang raised his head, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. It's my turn. The power of the vast expanse spread. The ninth change of the vast expanse 9 changes was unleashed. Boom! Tianyang punched Zhao Kongyan's head directly. Puffed. Zhao Kongyan spat out a mouthful of blood, as if his soul had left his body. Even so, he still summoned flames and attacked Tianyang from behind. However, the 2 black flame wings on Tianyang's back flapped. That incomparably violent flame was directly flattened. Tianyang punched out again, and Zhao Kongyan was sent flying with blood spurting out of his mouth. That's not right. How did the immortal divine fire become so strong? Tianyang raised his eyebrows, finally noticing that something was wrong. It had been some time since the last time he used the immortal divine fire. However, his immortal bloodline did not seem to have improved. The immortal body was understandable, but how did the immortal divine fire become so strong? However, Zhao Kongyan once again used the radiant fire kingly body. Die. Countless flames turned into sharp blades and condensed into rays of saber light in front of Zhao Kongyan. These rays of saber light formed a seemingly endless saber rain that flew toward Tianyang. Not bad. Seeing this, Tianyang smiled slightly and was about to slash out with the great void sword embryo. The sky, which had been clear just a moment ago, turned dark in an instant. Heaven and earth burial. Zhao Kongyan's expression changed drastically. The saber rain that he had just shot out was forcibly stopped, and the radiant fire kingly body was also dispelled. Goodbye. Zhao Kongyan looked extremely frightened. He mobilized all the inner yuan in his body and rushed into the distance. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the sky. Seeing this, Tianyang frowned slightly and looked at Zhao Kongyan, who had completely disappeared. Then he looked at the sky. It was so dark that no other color could be seen. This is Tianyang frowned. He had heard from the cultivator, who ran away in fright when he entered Burial Valley, that there would be a huge change in Burial Valley at night. However, because that person ran away too quickly, Tianyang did not know about the change in Burial Valley at night. Rumble. At this moment, Tianyang's expression changed slightly, and he looked down. Powerful auras were being released from below. Then, the green mountain from before seemed to be pulled by a huge hand and sank rapidly. The surging Jiang, he also turned into a water column that soared into the sky. After a while, the mountain range turned into an abyss. The entire world was pitch black. At the same time, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth turned into a surging death chi. Chapter 1581. It was as if an endless aura of death was surging towards the heavenly sun. Tianyang's expression changed. The immortal fire burned. As soon as the death chi came into contact with the undying divine flame, it was instantly annihilated. However, the aura of death was only the beginning of the process. Death energy surged out of the abyss like a tidal wave again, rushing toward Tianyang. Tianyang's expression changed slightly as he glanced to his side. There had been a few monsters in the sky before, but now there was nothing. Or rather, he could see the bones that had fallen into the abyss. The immortal fire burned fiercely around Tianyang, purifying the oncoming death energy. However, Tianyang's expression turned grave. This death energy, there's so much of it that it can kill even a spirit realm cultivator. Tianyang's expression was grave as he watched the death energy surge in from all directions, growing stronger by the second. Although the death energy was vast and terrifying, it didn't purposely attack living beings. Instead, it swarmed toward them regardless of the situation. Compared to the tide of death energy that targeted living beings, it was much less of a threat. However, if the death energy continued to surge, no matter how strong one was, they would die without a doubt. If one was slightly weaker, they might not even have the chance to crush the token. They would be corroded by the death energy and reduced to a pile of bones in an instant. The one who fled at the beginning probably didn't crush the token. This means that there's still a safe place in Burial Valley. The radiant fire, Heavenly King, also fled immediately after nightfall, but in a different direction than the first one. Tianyong muttered to himself, "This means that there's more than one safe place in Burial Valley." Although the immortal divine flame was still burning and burning away all the death energy that was surging towards him, Tianyong's life was almost in no danger. However, Burial Valley was too strange. Tianyong felt that he shouldn't be too confident, given the density of his immortal bloodline. Boom, boom, boom. At that moment, a loud sound was heard. Tianyong's expression changed slightly. He thought that something had happened to the tide of death energy, but he soon realized what was going on. The commotion came from Wanxiang's sky ruins. Tianyong's heart moved. The immortal fire was still burning outside, and it burned even more fiercely. His real body quickly entered Wanxiang's sky ruins. Wah! How can a flower hit me? As soon as he entered, he heard the screams of the demonized, vast expanse Holy Spirit. Tianyong turned around. The demonized, vast expanse Holy Spirit was now waving the giant spear in his hands wildly, trying to block the invasion of the death chi behind him. However, the strange thing was that when the vast expanse Holy Spirit's power was used against the death chi, it was actually corroded by the death chi instead. Soul-cleansing snow lotus? Tianyong of the snow lotus origin of death energy. His expression, he reached expression of death of soul-cleansing snow lotus, which was releasing death energy in all directions, fell into Tianyong's hands. However, even in Tianyong's hands, the soul-cleansing snow lotus was still restless. The grayish-black death energy kept spewing out, as if it wanted to turn the entire Wanxiang sky ruins into a land of death. However, with the heavens expanse holy palace and Tianyong's suppression, the soul-cleansing snow lotus' greatest achievement was only to scare the demonized vast expanse Holy Spirit. What's going on? Tianyong looked at the soul-cleansing snow lotus in his hands and frowned. Why did the soul-cleansing snow lotus suddenly go berserk? I don't know. The ground under the soul-cleansing snow lotus suddenly turned pitch black. Then, the soul-cleansing snow lotus above seemed to be contaminated, and it kept spewing out death energy. Ling Yuhan shook her head and said with concern, "Master, this death energy is very strange. The demonized vast expanse Holy Spirit even used the power of the heavens expanse holy palace, but they still couldn't suppress it. This place is very strange. Outside, it's all over," Tianyong said. At the same time, the soul-cleansing snow lotus in his hands kept spewing out terrifying death energy. However, the death energy that caused the demonized vast expanse Holy Spirit to panic and even chase him around the Wanxiang sky ruins did not have any effect on Tianyong's skin. Tianyong's skin did not even shine. What's going on? Seeing this, the demonized vast expanse Holy Spirit was stunned. Why didn't it attack you? Maybe it's because Tianyong raised his eyebrows, as if he had thought of something. In the next moment, the immortal flame burned. The ball of destructive black flame engulfed the soul-cleansing snow lotus. F*CK. Seeing this, the demonized vast expanse Holy Spirit's face changed. This is the soul-cleansing snow lotus. However, Tianyong did not stop there. The immortal flame continued to burn, and the death energy within the soul-cleansing snow lotus was completely ignited. Then, it was burned into nothingness. Less than 10 seconds later, the grayish-black airflow around the soul-cleansing snow lotus in Tianyong's hands had disappeared. It regained its previous pure white luster. The immortal flame seems to be able to restrain the death energy, Tianyong said. Then, the immortal flame was withdrawn. The soil that the soul-cleansing snow lotus was rooted in immediately released streams of grayish-black airflow, trying to infect the soul-cleansing snow lotus with the death energy again. However, it was easily destroyed by Tianyong. It seems like the treasures nurtured in the Burial Valley do not have any special side effects. It's just that the soil of the Burial Valley is strange. Tianyong muttered to himself. The demonic beast from before turned into white bones after being washed by the death energy. However, the soul-cleansing snow lotus survived. It even became the source of the death energy for a period of time. Could it be that the death energy has the ability to spread infection? Hearing that, Ling Yuhan and the demonized vast expanse Holy Spirit felt chills run down their spines. The death energy was already strange enough. Now, he was telling them that the death energy could be even stranger? What kind of place was the Burial Valley? You two stay here and look after the soul-cleansing snow lotus. I'll go out and take a look. The immortal flame outside was still burning. Even without Tianyang's control, it was still burning. Tianyang's lips curled up, and a sharp light flashed in his eyes. This feeling was as if the immortal flame was not using Tianyang's true yuan to burn. Instead, it was igniting the death energy in this area. Tianyang's body flashed, and he appeared in the Burial Valley. In the next moment, Tianyang let out a soft shout. The immortal flame that was only maintained in a small area suddenly expanded to a radius of 1,000 feet. In the pitch-black Burial Valley, it was as dazzling as a black meteor. As expected, Tianyang's eyes lit up and he clenched his fists. The immortal flame did not need to consume his true yuan. If that's the case, Tianyang muttered to himself. He temporarily put aside the plan of finding a safe place. I could take a good look at the secrets of the Burial Valley. End of chapter. Chapter 1582. Uncover the secrets of Sinecure Valley. Tianyang's lips curled into a smile as a sliver of light shone from within. Tianyang still didn't know why his indestructible body and undying divine fire had suddenly grown stronger and killed Zhao Kongyan of the ancient Dao sect. Now it seemed like it had a lot to do with the death aura in Sinecure Valley. Right now, Tianyang was surrounded by a sea of undying divine fire. If not for the pitch-black darkness of Sinecure Valley and the undying divine fire, it might have lit up the entire valley. Still, it's better not to attract too much attention. Tianyang muttered to himself. Then, he retracted his immortal divine flame domain. Tianyang's figure flashed as he flew down into the abyss below. The most eye-catching thing in Sinecure Valley during the day was the Green Mountains. In the dark of night, it was naturally the Green Mountains that formed the endless abyss. If he wanted to investigate Sinecure Valley, it was naturally the best choice to start from the abyss. Whoosh! The undying divine fire covered the surface of his skin. Although it was only a few millimeters thick, it still incinerated all the death aura that attacked him. In this environment, Tianyang couldn't unleash the maximum speed of the 9th change of the heavens expanse 9 changes, but he could still charge into the abyss in a few short seconds. What a strong death aura! Tianyang had only charged a meter into the abyss when the death aura's density increased countless times. The death aura here was extremely violent compared to the death aura outside, which was still relatively calm even though it was surging like a tide. The moment it sensed someone charging into the abyss, it was as if a pair of giant hands were controlling it. Endless amounts of death aura rushed toward Tianyang. Although it was similar to the outside world, it was just a pure energy attack. However, a quantitative change would lead to a qualitative change. When the simplest method of attack accumulated the amount of death aura to an extreme, it would become the most violent attack. Boom, 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 boom. Tianyang's true yuan shield was instantly struck by the death aura tide. The undying divine fire was only a few millimeters thick. Although it could deal with the death aura outside with ease, it was instantly destroyed by the death aura that had increased exponentially. The grayish-black aura that was almost tangible slammed into Tianyang's chest. However, the death aura that Tianyang expected didn't engulf him and rob him of his life force. The death aura seemed to follow some sort of passage, following Tianyang's innately blocked meridians and entered Tianyang's heart. The undying divine fire's body was death aura and of the divine fire, S's. However, the deathly aura didn't wreak havoc after entering Tianyang's body. Bloods of the divine fires divines, of the of s blood, of the dark of the. That was close. Tianyang heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, streams of undying divine fire were released from Tianyang's body. The death aura in the abyss was far stronger than the outside world. The undying divine fire, or rather, the undying bloodline, was the only way Tianyang could deal with the death aura. Naturally, he had to push it to the limit. In any case, the undying divine fire would only consume a trace of Tianyang's true yuan at the beginning. After that, it would automatically ignite the death aura outside and restore itself. Could it be that there's a formation that gathers the death aura here? Tianyang raised his eyebrows. However, this was only his guess. At least for now, he didn't sense any fluctuations of a formation. Roar! Just as Tianyang was about to go deeper, an extremely shrill roar suddenly came from the abyss. In the next moment, a claw formed completely by the death aura broke through space and charged toward Tianyang. There's a living thing in this abyss. Seeing this, Tianyang raised his eyebrows. The great void sword embryo appeared in his hand instantly. He raised his hand and slashed. The sharp sword light collided with the black claw. It broke the black claw effortlessly. At this moment, the source of the black claw was revealed. It was a giant dragon. It was hundreds of meters long. Its bones were still emitting a black gold light. There seemed to be two balls of fire burning in its eyes. Or rather, there were indeed two balls of fire burning. This death aura can even nurture undead. Seeing this, Tianyang was shocked. He muttered to himself as he looked at the dark gold skeletal dragon, which was definitely not weak when it was alive. At this moment, the dark gold skeletal dragon opened its mouth and spat out a grayish-black stream of air. It was like a burning flame that charged toward Tianyang. However, it was the same as before. The moment the death aura came into contact with the undying divine fire, it was burned to ashes. Not even a trace of its existence was left behind. The dark gold skeletal dragon did not seem to have any spiritual intelligence. It spat out a stream of death aura fire that looked like it was spitting out a breath. Just like before, it was burned to ashes by the undying divine fire. What's going on? Tianyang frowned as he looked at the dark gold skeletal dragon that was continuously attacking and being burned to ashes by the undying divine fire. He thought that the existence that came out of the abyss would not be easy to deal with. Tianyang was prepared for a fierce battle. In the end, this was it. In a flash, Tianyang appeared behind the dark gold skeletal dragon and easily cut in half. After being cut in half, the skeletal dragon's head continued to spit out streams of death aura at Tianyang. However, it was no longer a threat. What's going on in this burial valley? Tianyang frowned. His body flickered again as he tried to fly deeper into the abyss. He had a feeling that the secret of the burial valley was no small matter. Perhaps it had something to do with his undying bloodline. However, just as Tianyang was about to fly deeper, the sky suddenly turned pitch black. A great sun suddenly appeared above Tianyang's head. The abyss, which had been releasing endless death aura, also rose abruptly. The green mountains and clear waters that had disappeared earlier reappeared. The death aura in the surroundings vanished in the blink of an eye, as if it had never appeared. Tianyang was now standing in midair. The undying divine fire that had almost concealed Tianyang's entire being was now extremely conspicuous in the burial valley. How strange! Tianyang frowned. He looked at his surroundings, which had returned to normal, and withdrew the undying divine fire. However, the moment he withdrew the undying divine fire, Tianyang's heart suddenly contracted. His undying bloodline seemed to be boiling and going berserk. What's going on? Tianyang's pupils contracted as a heart-wrenching pain spread through his limbs and bones. As time passed, the pain grew stronger and stronger. His entire body's skin had already turned into an extremely high temperature in an instant. His undying bloodline had mutated. Man of Howman, I didn't think you'd be able to survive the night of the burial valley. At that moment, a loud shout was heard. 3 ninth-grade spirit fires burned and rose into the air, instantly transforming into a flame giant. But now it's time for you to die. Zhao Kongyan's voice also rang out. Several figures in the ancient Dao sect's robes also appeared in the distance from Tianyang. Chapter 1583. Zhao Kongyan. Although Tianyang had almost lost consciousness due to his undying bloodline, the divine Dao laws he had condensed with the help of the extreme flame heart lotus were still extremely sturdy. The moment Tianyang discovered Zhao Kongyan, he also discovered the 2 ancient Dao sect disciples surrounding him. They were much weaker than Zhao Kongyan, only at the level of peak Saint Kings. However, if they worked together with Zhao Kongyan, they would be no match for him. They would be a powerful faction if they worked together. At this moment, Zhao Kongyan also discovered that something was wrong with Tianyang. Why did this guy suddenly become like this? In Zhao Kongyan's eyes, Tianyang's body was constantly releasing pitch-black flames before withdrawing them. His skin was scarlet red like a monster. Looks like the heavens are helping me. Losing to Tianyang the day before had always been a thorn in Zhao Kongyan's heart. Now that he finally had a chance to redeem himself, how could he let it go? Wangda, Wang-er, restrain him for me. Zhao Kongyan roared excitedly. When he thought about how he could kill this person from Haomen today and redeem himself, as well as receive a reward from Sheng Qingzi, his heart surged. The radiant fire, kingly physique formed from the fusion of 3 great flames was also constantly fluctuating. The 2 ancient Dao sect disciples immediately nodded in agreement. The auras of 2 peak Saint Kings erupted. Originally, we didn't plan on dealing with the person from Haomen so quickly. We wanted to kill you the moment you stepped into the top 50. However, since you've offended senior brother Sheng Qingzi, only death awaits you. The 2 spoke at the same time, almost as if they were the same person. The 2 strands of Saint King true origin worked extremely well together, forming a huge cage. Heavenly prison of the 4 corners. A terrifying sealing power erupted from the 2 primordial essences and rapidly fused together to form a huge cage that enveloped the heavenly sun. Is this the death chi of Burial Valley? Tianyang was completely unaware that there was a restraining force acting on his body. Almost all of his strength was used to suppress the rebellion of the undying bloodline in his body. The concentration of Tianyang's immortal bloodline was pitifully low. Logically speaking, even if the immortal bloodline went berserk, it shouldn't have caused Tianyang to almost lose consciousness. Now it seemed that the immortal bloodline was still strengthening. How did it suddenly become stronger? Tianyang had a puzzled look on his face. At this moment, Zhao Kongyan looked at Tianyang, whose entire body was crimson red. Even though he was restrained, he didn't move at all. Zhao Kongyan immediately burst into laughter. Although I don't know what happened to you, you will die today. 3 stage 9 spiritual fires erupted. Zhao Kongyan's enormous flame giant burst forth with an agility that didn't match his enormous size. He continuously condensed one seal after another. It was just like the seal of flame that he had condensed during the battle with Tianyang yesterday. However, this time, it was even more powerful than the previous one. Their numbers were even greater. Kill! With a loud roar, Zhao Kongyan pushed with both hands. The seemingly endless seal of flame charged toward Tianyang like a torrential downpour. Zhao Kongyan's lips curled into a smile. He had prepared for this attack for a long time. Even eldest senior brother Sheng Qingzi wouldn't dare to take it head-on with one hand. What the hell? Tianyang growled impatiently. In the next moment, the incomparably violent immortal fire seemed to have found a vent and charged in all directions. Extremely black flames shot out in all directions. Boom! In an instant, the cage shattered. The 2 ancient Dao sect disciples spat out large mouthfuls of blood. However, before they could dodge, they were ignited by the immortal fire. Ah! The 2 ancient Dao sect disciples immediately screamed. However, it only lasted for a moment. The undying flame completely burned the two of them into ashes. At the same time, the immortal fire collided with the countless seal of flame that Zhao Kongyan had released. What? Zhao Kongyan's expression changed drastically. He stared in disbelief at the two ancient Dao sect disciples who had disappeared in an instant. How was this possible? They weren't just any random people. They were geniuses that the ancient Dao sect had spent countless cultivation resources to cultivate. They didn't even have the chance to activate their safety token to teleport out before they were killed by Tianyang. Damn it! In an instant, the disbelief turned into endless rage that charged toward Tianyang, who was doing his best to control the immortal fire. The three spirit fires burned wildly. The immortal fire that was colliding with the seal of flame was instantly engulfed by the seal of flame that had suddenly strengthened. With boundless killing intent, he ruthlessly charged towards Tianyang. Don't bother me. Tianyang's mood was extremely bad. Almost instinctively, his figure flashed and appeared in front of the countless seal of flame. Then, the endless, undying, divine flame rushed out. Three styles of indestructible. The immortal fire surged. At this moment, Tianyang vaguely understood why the immortal fire had suddenly become so violent. It was because the immortal fire had suddenly been greatly strengthened by an unknown source. Its concentration had skyrocketed, causing the immortal divine bodies that Tianyang cultivated to be unable to bear the sudden increase in power of the immortal fire. Tianyang was doing his best to control the immortal fire. Otherwise, the power would have gone berserk. However, there was no time to control it now. 5 swords of the heavenly sovereign, 5 swords in unison. Immortal great mystery palm, immortal burning sky seal. The 3 styles of indestructible that he had learned from the immortal heavenly sovereign statue in the Tianshao great world were all unleashed at this moment. 5 sword lights of different attributes, but equally powerful shot out. They rapidly merged in the air and formed an invincible sword light. A vast and majestic palm print that looked like the descent of a sovereign was also formed. Vast immortal fire swirled and condensed. Then it was a peerless fist print that displayed the violent immortal fire to the extreme. The 3 styles of indestructible burst out at the same time. The 3 styles of indestructible. At this moment, Zhao Kongyan finally realized something. His expression changed drastically as he roared madly. How can it be the 3 styles of indestructible? How can you have the 3 styles of indestructible? At this moment, the immortal fire had already arrived in advance. The terrifying attack of the 3 styles of indestructible destroyed Zhao Kongyan's full-strength attack at this moment. Are you from the immortal imperial court? Impossible, impossible. Zhao Kongyan roared madly before he was swallowed by the 3 styles of indestructible. Sword light, palm print, fist print, and black fire. Even the radiant fire, kingly body couldn't withstand the terrifying attack. In just a moment, Radiant Fire Heavenly King Zhao Kongyan didn't have time to crush his safety token. He was turned into ashes. Chapter 1584. Boom! With a loud bang and Zhao Kongyan's annihilation, Heavenly Sun's condition recovered a little. When his immortal bloodline went berserk, it was as if Qianyang's physical body could no longer withstand the sudden expansion of the river. Now that he had used the 3 styles of indestructible to kill the 3 disciples from the ancient Dao sect, there was a huge hole in the river. It was as if the river now had an outlet, and it reduced the pressure on the Heavenly Sun by quite a bit. What's with the deathly chi in Burial Valley? How can it cause the immortal bloodline to mutate? Tianyang heaved a sigh of relief, but his expression quickly turned serious. The immortal bloodline was inherited from the immortal heavenly sovereign, other than the immortal divine body, which was exclusive to the immortal bloodline. Nothing could affect the immortal bloodline. However, the immortal bloodline had only devoured a little of the deathly chi in Burial Valley, causing it to go berserk. If Zhao Kongyan had not brought the 2 trash disciples from the ancient Dao sect to their deaths, Tianyang's immortal bloodline would not have gone berserk. Tianyang might have exploded from the immortal bloodline. The days and nights in Burial Valley are very strange. I'd better find a place to calm the immortal bloodline in my body. Tianyang muttered to himself. Then, he randomly found a secluded cave and summoned a ball of immortal divine fire to seal the cave. Then, he entered the Vientiane Sky ruins. If he cultivated outside, he could be swallowed by the deathly chi in Burial Valley at any time. What the F***CK? What's wrong with you? When Tianyang entered the Vientiane Sky ruins, he was discovered by the demonized vast expanse Saint Spirit. It was worse just now, Tianyang said casually. He quickly sat down cross-legged and used the small world's power on Tianyang's body. After so many years of refinement, the Wanxiang Sky ruins had long become a part of the heavenly sun. At this moment, mobilizing the power of the small world of the Wanxiang Sky ruins was as easy as moving a finger. Master, although Tianyang had weakened a lot, his aura was still fluctuating and his skin was flushed red. Ling Yuhan was also very worried. She had been with the Tianyang for so many years, but she had never seen such a situation before. At this time, the surface of Tianyang's skin began to burn with undying divine flames. What should he do if he wanted to suppress the berserk, undying energy? The previous suppression was only a temporary measure. If Zhao Kongyan hadn't delivered his head in time, he would have exploded and died. Venting was fine, but it was too wasteful. The most efficient way was naturally using this undying energy to cultivate the immortal divine body. Tianyang was restricted by the density of his immortal bloodline. Although it was easy for him to cultivate the indestructible body, it was very difficult for him to make further progress. Now that he suddenly had so much undead energy, it would be a waste not to use it. The immortal divine flames burned rapidly, and the immortal bloodline in Tianyang's body surged like a great river. The cultivation of the immortal body was very simple, but also very berserk. Using the immortal divine flames to continuously refine the body. In layman's terms, it was continuously burning oneself. Tianyang's crimson skin shattered in an instant, and his entire body exploded for a split second. However, he quickly recovered. At the same time, Tianyang's indestructible body was also constantly evolving. However, Tianyang didn't know. Every time his immortal blood flowed into his heart and out of his body, the density of his immortal blood would increase by a few notches. Although this change was very subtle, it was real. Over time, Tianyang's extremely low density of immortal bloodline also gradually strengthened. After cultivating for an unknown period of time, Tianyang finally recovered. Although the undead energy was enormous, there was ultimately a limit. After Tianyang destroyed his body and restored it thousands of times, it was finally completely consumed. However, Tianyang's physical strength had also become much stronger after countless times of destruction and reconstruction. Previously, among Tianyang's vital essence, physical body, and primordial spirit, the power of the primordial spirit far surpassed the vital essence and physical body. In terms of vital essence, although his cultivation was only at the middle Saint Emperor realm, with the addition of the 10 origins, his vital essence was actually not much inferior to the primordial spirit. In fact, the physical body was the weakest. However, after going through the brutal refinement of the undead energy, Tianyang's physical body had clearly broken through a huge level. Even compared to those races that were born with incomparably strong physical bodies, it was not inferior at all. This meant that Tianyang could fight an ancient divine dragon with his physical body alone. However, it's really not that easy to become a god with one's physical body. Tianyang sighed and clenched his right hand. Vast and surging power like the Yangtze River reverberated within, but did not materialize into divine Tao laws. Compared to a body that had already condensed divine Tao laws and a primordial spirit that had reached the half-condensed divine soul realm, it was still lacking by quite a bit. However, in the domain of peak saint emperors and demigods, Tianyang's physical body could already be called invincible. If Tianyang were to encounter the black gold bone dragon again, Tianyang was confident that he could directly take the other party's death energy head-on and blast that fellow apart with a single punch. However, Tianyang did not notice that. Even the riot of the undead bloodline, caused by the enormous death energy, had completely calmed down. When his undead bloodline passed through his heart, it would still grow a little stronger, although this little bit was much weaker than before. However, it was still growing. Perhaps one day, this constant strengthening would bring about an incomparably huge effect. I can't break through my true origin for now, but if I want to explore the secrets of Burial Valley, just a physical body that is invincible under the God realm is far from enough. Tianyang muttered to himself. The mysteries of Burial Valley far exceeded his expectations. He had originally thought that he could defeat any demigod, but with the strength of a god, exploring the various small worlds of Lingyun Peak shouldn't be a problem. However, the first Burial Valley greatly exceeded Tianyang's expectations. However, this is also an opportunity. Tianyang's lips curled up. The more dangerous a small world was, the greater the benefits it contained. The death energy that had caused Tianyang's undead bloodline to riot was terrifying. But after dealing with this problem, Tianyang's physical strength had greatly improved. What would happen if he continued to explore? However, before that, I'll use what I have on hand first. Tianyang smiled slightly. With a flip of his wrist, the soul-cleansing snow lotus, which had been purified by the undead fire, appeared in Tianyang's hand. The extreme flame heart lotus allowed Tianyang to condense divine Tao laws. The soul-cleansing snow lotus should be able to allow Tianyang to directly shape the divine soul. End of chapter. Chapter 1585. Then, this soul-cleansing snow lotus turned into a stream of light and fell into Tianyang's mouth. Although this soul-cleansing snow lotus was the same as the extreme flame heart lotus, they should be refined into elixirs to achieve the greatest effect. However, with Tianyang's current situation, he had already cultivated to the half-condensed divine soul realm. No matter how great the medicinal effect was, it would only be able to complete the divine soul. Now, Tianyang relied on the aura of his undying bloodline to forcefully condense the divine soul. The success rate naturally soared. The soul-cleansing snow lotus melted in his mouth. Even saying that it melted was a little too much. The moment it fell into Tianyang's mouth, it completely turned into energy. Immediately after, Tianyang's essence spirit seemed to be about to be frozen. His entire person froze on the spot. This level might not even be as good as the essence spirit secret technique I got from the Northern Frost Dragon King. Tianyang smiled slightly. The tiny essence spirit in his soul suddenly opened its eyes. The power of the soul, cleansing snow lotus that turned into solid ice and sealed Tianyang, exploded at this moment. Immediately after, endless divine Tao laws were released from the tiny essence spirit. An incomparably terrifying aura was released. The power of the soul, cleansing snow lotus that was about to turn into ice and seal Tianyang's essence spirit did not even have a chance to condense and form again before it was directly snatched away. It was directly devoured. If other people who used heavenly treasures to cultivate were to see this, they would probably be shocked to the extreme. They used natural treasures directly, and all of them were passively enduring the powerful energy of the natural treasures wreaking havoc in their bodies. After a period of time, they would then start to passively absorb the power of the natural treasures. During this process, the loss of energy was incomparably huge. However, Tianyang's devouring, how was it passive? It was simply more active than it could be. He only allowed the soul-cleansing snow lotus to be arrogant for a while, and it turned from an incomparably ferocious giant beast into a little lamb that was at the mercy of others. The difference between this and elixirs was only the amount of elixirs and other herbs. In terms of energy absorption, it probably far surpassed elixirs. After all, elixirs had to be neutralized. Tianyang directly swallowed it whole. Not bad. Seeing this, Tianyang smiled slightly. His essence spirit had already condensed divine Tao laws. It was just that his cultivation base was too weak. At that time, he was only a heaven-grade great saint, which was why he had stopped at the stage of half-condensed spirit. Now, with the soul-cleansing snow lotus as an opportunity to break through, the speed of his breakthrough was incomparably fast. While Tianyang was cultivating in seclusion, secluded to cultivate, Burial Valley wasn't calm either. Day and night in Burial Valley did not have a specific pattern. The length of day and night was uncertain. At most, to determine it of time or region, this range was very vague, and it was only concluded through the experiences of countless people. It was so cleansing. Cleansing S's was, as spirit was. Its spirit sing soul. S to be. Only daring people would dare to explore the valley during the safe period of at least 60 hours during the day. Those from the ancient Tao sect said they were going to attack Haomen, but there's no more news about them. A man dressed in the robes of the Zhongshuan demon sect sneered. They most likely died in the valley. They rushed out immediately after the night ended. The dangers of the valley are most likely still there. It's normal for them to be strangely devoured by the valley. The man from the Zhongshuan demon sect sneered. Although the Sky Cloud Hall, the ancient Tao sect, and the Zhongshuan demon sect were attacking Haomen together, it didn't mean that they were allies. In fact, it was the exact opposite. These three factions were eagerly waiting for the other two factions to be destroyed so that they could monopolize Haomen's great treasure and collect the corpses of the other two factions. The Zhongshuan demon sect disciple didn't feel any pity for the disappearance of Zhao Kongyin and the others. However, the people from Haomen aren't bad. They even messed with Zhao Kongyin once. The man from the Zhongshuan demon sect chuckled. Zhao Kongyin is an ordinary faction. Although it's not certain, there's a 60 to 70% chance that he will enter the top 50. This person from Haomen is stronger than Zhao Kongyin. His chances of getting into the top 50 are higher. Then we can't let him live. Murderous intent surfaced in the man's eyes. If Zhao Kongyin can't, then neither can I. But the Zhongshuan demon sect will reward you handsomely. Everyone in the valley will be rewarded. If anyone is willing to follow me to kill the people from Haomen, I, Lin Shan of the Zhongshuan demon sect, will save that person's life once. Or an incomplete demigod artifact. The man from the Zhongshuan demon sect roared. His voice rolled across the entire valley. Burial Valley was very quiet during the day. Those who dared to set their sights on Burial Valley were few and far between. However, there were many who dared to attack the people from Haomen. Moreover, the leader of the ancient Tao sect, Shang Qingzi, had already issued a bounty for the people from Haomen. Now, the Zhongshuan demon sect was offering a bounty as well. There were bound to be brave men when there was a great reward. Where are the people from Haomen? A voice filled with murderous intent echoed throughout the valley. Countless people in the valley had taken advantage of the safety of the day to kill their way out of the valley and sharpen their blades. Tianyang was still cultivating peacefully in the Wanxiang sky ruins. Since he already had the foundation to construct the tiny primordial spirit with his divine Tao laws, Tianyang's spirit was formed at an unusually fast speed. Countless divine chains of order appeared in Tianyang's spirit sea once again. Countless impurities flew out of Tianyang's tiny primordial spirit under the effect of the spirit cleansing snow lotus. The impurities in Tianyang's spirit sea were all expelled by the spirit cleansing snow lotus. Newborn life forms usually had a breath of Kanate Chi. With this breath of Kanate Chi, they could achieve twice the results with half the effort no matter what they cultivated. The same was true for the soul as well. A newborn soul was spotlessly white and pure beyond compare. Tianyang's spirit sea was like a newborn soul. It was pure to the extreme. Divine chains of order and divine Tao laws sparkled in Tianyang's spirit sea, and the tiny primordial spirit's eyes grew brighter and brighter. Divine Tao laws, the divine chains of order, all transformed into the tiny primordial spirit's laws. Strands of divine Tao laws enveloped Tianyang's primordial spirit origin at the center of his spirit sea. The tiny primordial spirit sat cross-legged within. It looked like a giant cocoon. Break! With a shout, the cocoon shattered with a loud boom. The tiny, golden nascent spirit transformed into the color of chaos in an instant. No, the tiny primordial spirit no longer existed. It was a tiny primordial spirit. Divine Tao laws, forge my body. Boundless spirit, forge my heart. My spirit complete. End of chapter. Chapter 1586. Divine Soul formed. Countless rays of light that were more powerful than the improvement of his physical body were released. At this moment, Tianyang felt as though his entire body had become lighter. His body felt lighter. Then, Tianyang suddenly realized that his vision was much higher. His field of vision was raised a lot higher. When he lowered his head, he could even see his physical body that was in the midst of cultivation. Astral projection, daydreaming. Seeing this, Tianyang raised his eyebrows and then controlled his body that was no longer a physical body. With a thought, the power of the divine soul turned into a storm and swept in all directions. In terms of power, it was no weaker than Tianyang's most powerful cycle of life and death. Then Tianyang's hand shook. His divine soul seemed to have solidified. When he punched out, even the space trembled. Streams of divine path aura flowed around Tianyang's body. Waves of oppressive power were released from Tianyang's divine soul. Once the divine soul is solidified, the soul is no longer the weakest point. Instead, it is equivalent to a second life. The immortal blood was a drop of blood that could absorb endless spiritual chi of heaven and earth to restore one's life. However, it was only the physical body. If the primordial spirit was shattered, those who deserved to die would still die. The immortal prince had not killed Tianyang previously because he had underestimated him and the protection of the Tsang Emperor sword fragment. Even in the realm of the gods, Tianyang could not see through the Tsang Emperor sword. This showed how mysterious and powerful the Tsang Emperor sword was. However, no matter how powerful it was only a fragment. If it used all its power, the Tsang Emperor sword might not be able to block it. Once the primordial spirit was destroyed, Tianyang would be finished. Now the divine soul was successfully solidified. Tianyang's only weakness was that it had disappeared. In addition, because of the immortal blood and the strengthening of his physical body, Tianyang was almost immortal now. Now, unless an extremely powerful immortal state warrior attacks, I have the ability to escape unscathed. Tianyang smiled. As long as there was a drop of blood, he would be able to escape unscathed. An ordinary God Realm warrior would not be able to kill Tianyang to the point that not even a drop of blood could escape. Why is there someone here? At this moment, Tianyang raised his eyebrows as he noticed that the disciples of various sects were shuttling back and forth in the sky above Burial Valley, as if they were looking for something. Logically speaking, these disciples should have fought each other crazily as soon as they met. But now, after meeting him, he only exchanged a few words with him before turning around and leaving. In order to end the first round of the Tournament of Geniuses, one had to fight until only one person remained. In other words, everyone was an enemy. At this moment, someone seemed to have discovered the undying divine flame burning at the entrance of Tianyang's cave. Look, there is a strange flame here. It's that Yang Tian from Haomen. A loud shout rang out. Instantly, the disciples of the various sects who were searching all over the Valley of Returning Graves were shocked. Then, he quickly rushed to the place where the disciple who let out the loud shout was located. Something's really wrong. Lin Shan of the Zhongshuan demon sect had been paying attention to the movements of the various cultivators. Now that he had made a major discovery, he immediately flew over. A satisfied smile appeared on his face when he saw the undying divine flame that had completely sealed off the entrance of the cave. The Valley of Returning Graves was like an ordinary treasure trove during the day. Apart from a few monster and demon beasts, there was basically no threat. It was impossible for such a perfect black flame to seal off the entrance of the cave. If you're sure, I can help you once. Lin Shan smiled coldly, then looked at the wall of black flame in front of him and snorted. Break! Then his fist, which contained black vital essence, blasted toward the high wall formed by the immortal fire. However, as Lin Shan had expected, this punch did not directly shatter this seemingly weak and thin layer of firewall. Instead, it was Qianyang's spirit that stood above their heads that saw everything clearly. Interesting. Qianyang's lips curled. It seemed that Zhao Kongyan of the ancient Tao sect wasn't the only one who had his eyes on him. There were quite a few people who had their eyes on him. Seems like whether it was the background of Hao Min or that bounty of Shang Qingzi's, they were both unexpectedly hateful. However, Tianyang didn't care too much. No matter how many ants there were, they were still ants. Boom, boom, boom. With 3 loud explosions, Lin Shan's relentless efforts finally destroyed the undying divine flame that Tianyang had set up to prevent the death aura from invading the valley of returning graves at night. However, as soon as Lin Shan destroyed Tianyang's wall of flame, Tianyang's spirit appeared in front of everyone. Who is it? Lin Shan's muscles tensed and his expression changed drastically. Waves of powerful pressure erupted from his body. However, he sneered when he saw Tianyang's face. I didn't expect this to be your hiding place. Lin Shan's sneer deepened when he saw Tianyang's pale face. It seemed that Haoman hadn't found a safe place immediately that night in the Valley of Returning Graves. The death aura in the Valley of Returning Graves killed anyone below the Heavenly Emperor realm. Even those above the Heavenly Emperor realm couldn't last more than a few minutes. This guy must be extremely weak after coming into contact with the death aura. I didn't expect Zhao Kongyan and the others to still not discover you. It seems that your luck is not bad to be able to heal here. Lin Shan chuckled. He was certain that Tianyang had been injured by the death aura in the Valley of Returning Graves. At the same time, he released his powerful half-step demigod inner Yuan. He was the undisputed number 2 figure in the Zhongshuan demon sect. Even though Yang Tian had defeated Zhao Kongyan once, there was no way he could escape from Lin Shan in his weakened state. In truth, it was just that Tianyang's spirit wasn't lustful. Everyone, follow me, Lin Shan roared. The next moment, his black inner Yuan condensed into a heavy hammer and smashed down at Tianyang. Countless cultivators' eyes turned red at the thought of Shang Qingzi's bounty and Lin Shan's bounty. Killing intent surged. Crimson, blue, blood, black, white, and green. As the inner Yuan exploded, the entire sky was dyed in a myriad of colors. Then, countless attacks blasted toward Tianyang. Everyone wanted to kill him. Only one person. It was the first person Tianyang met in the Valley of Returning Graves and gave Tianyang some information. He stood in the air, his entire body trembling slightly. He knew that Haoman didn't even know that this was the Valley of Returning Graves. How could he have found a safe place? Moreover, the place where Tianyang was now was almost exactly the same as the place where he had first entered. This guy hadn't moved at all, but he had survived the night in the Valley of Returning Graves. Not bad. The corners of Tianyang's mouth curled up. But are you sure? Are you not courting death? End of chapter. Chapter 1587. As soon as he finished speaking, endless divine spirit energy burst out from his body. Tianyang, who was originally slightly pale, was still standing in the same spot. However, the waves of pressure directly crushed the attacks that were coming towards him. They were directly crushed. Even though they were thousands of meters away, the only person who didn't make a move had a drastic change in expression. His waist unconsciously bent down. As the person closest to the heavenly sun, the pressure that Lin Shan was under was naturally the greatest. As if there was a heavy weight on his body, Lin Shan's half-step demigod cultivation did not have any effect. He spat out a mouthful of blood and knelt on the ground on one knee. Streaks of black true essence swirled around Lin Shan like a storm, trying to resist the pressure of this spiritual pressure. However, this was only the lightest. Some of the weaker ones had already knelt on both knees, as if they had submitted to Tianyang. Weak here is only a relative term. After all, those who could enter the Prodigy Tournament would not be weak. Those who dared to attack Tianyang in a place like Burial Valley were extremely confident in their own strength. However, even if they were holy emperors, they still had to submit. Because this was the spiritual energy pressure, the soul of a deity. How could you? Lin Shan spat out blood. He could not see Tianyang's spiritual energy body, but he could see that the true essence pressure was different from the spiritual energy pressure. This pressure had nothing to do with true essence. The reason why they knelt was that their primordial spirits were completely suppressed. Half-step divine soul. I didn't expect Haomen's primordial spirit cultivation to be so strong, even though his cultivation is not strong. Lin Shan roared. In the next moment, endless black, true essence rushed into the sky. It temporarily broke free from Tianyang's spiritual energy pressure and charged towards Tianyang. It was the same type as the evil Sky Dragon Emperor, but it was much stronger than the evil Sky Dragon Emperor. No wonder Zhao Kongyan was defeated by you. However, today you can only die. The Darkness Origin Realm opened. Within a radius of 1,000 meters, countless rays of light were blocked, as if there was a black barrier. Inside, other than Lin Shan, there was only darkness in front of everyone's eyes. Die! Lin Shan snorted coldly and quietly disappeared into the darkness. The next time he appeared, he was behind Tianyang and stabbed out with the sharp blade condensed from the Darkness Origin in his hand. This attack was the Zhongshuan Devil Sect's secret art of assassination that Lin Shan had cultivated since he was a child. He had cultivated it from the origin transformation stage all the way to the half-step demigod stage. Every single time, so long as his opponent was unable to stop him from releasing the World of Darkness, then he would definitely be killed by the World of Darkness. Poochie. The sound of a sharp blade piercing through flesh rang out, and a smug smile appeared on Lin Shan's face. However, in the next moment, the darkness suddenly dispersed. While Lin Shan was still in shock, he was shocked to find that the person his dagger had pierced through was not Haomen Tian as he had imagined. Instead, it was an unknown cultivator. The Zhongshuan Devil Sect. The cultivator's strength did not seem weak. After being pierced by the dagger, he did not die immediately. Instead, he roared with deep hatred. The Devil Sect, as expected of the Devil Sect. In the next moment, the cultivator who had been pierced by the dagger of darkness and knew that he would definitely die, brazenly chose to self-destruct. Boom! A deafening sound rang out, and violent inner yuan was released in all directions. Although Lin Shan had immediately activated the World of Darkness to protect himself, he was still sent flying by the explosion, and, at the same time, he spat out mouthfuls of blood. His eyes were also filled with disbelief. He had clearly aimed at Tianyang, so why did he kill someone he did not even know? It's impossible for a half-step divine soul to do that. Lin Shan roared, then once again disappeared into the shadows and charged towards Tianyang. However, Tianyang only smiled and completely released the power of his spirit. Who told you that I'm a half-step divine soul? Lin Shan, who had already reached within 10 meters of Tianyang, was the first to have his primordial spirit frozen after releasing the secret art of ice. Then it seemed to spread. The dozens of people besieging Tianyang were completely frozen by this primordial spirit's secret art of the great sage realm that came from Small World. This is... Lin Shan's expression changed drastically. Although his primordial spirit was frozen, he still had the ability to think. This is a spirit. In the blink of an eye, he had frozen dozens of Saint Emperors. Previously, I assassinated the wrong person. Was it also because of your spirit's interference? Lin Shan roared. Hearing this, Tianyang smiled slightly and did not say anything. He had only used his spirit to disrupt all the primordial spirit fluctuations around him. Lin Shan himself had also relied on the senses of his primordial spirit to find his assassination target in the World of Darkness. Now, his primordial spirit fluctuations were all messed up. It was normal to kill the wrong person. However, this spirit does not have a sufficiently powerful spirit secret art to support it. It's only the first time that it has such a great effect. Tianyang sighed softly, then flicked his finger. The dozens of prodigies whose spirits had been frozen by the secret art of ice all died. This time, it was their primordial spirits that died. Before they died, they could not even move. The life-saving token was once again useless. As for Lin Shan, he was lucky enough to survive. However, his primordial spirit was also severely injured. His face was even paler than Tianyang's face before he recovered. Why didn't you kill me?" Lin Shan said in disbelief. Now that his primordial spirit was severely injured, he could not even mobilize his half-step demigod True Yuan. He believed that if Tianyang wanted to kill him, he could have done so earlier. With the power of his spirit, it was impossible for him to be so close. "Without you, how could I enter the 3 major sects?" Tianyang smiled slightly. In the next moment, streaks of spirit power rose. The enslavement mark that he had used on Yun Xianyuan previously blasted open Lin Shan's spirit sea and imprinted the mark on Lin Shan's primordial spirit. At the same time, Tianyang pulled forcefully, and the primordial spirit origin source that Lin Shan was trying to protect was extracted by Tianyang. "What did you do?" In just an instant, Lin Shan realized that his primordial spirit had something extra, and something was missing at the same time. "I've enslaved you." Tianyang chuckled softly and said, "What?" Lin Shan's expression changed drastically when he heard that, and he hurriedly checked his primordial spirit. Immediately, he found a complicated, blood-colored mark in the depths of his primordial spirit. Although it was not quite the same as the enslavement mark in Lin Shan's memory, he could still sense its effect. Lin Shan's pupils constricted. Just as he shouted that word, the enslavement mark immediately erupted with rays of demonic light. It bombarded his primordial spirit. Lin Shan spat out blood wildly. Then, he finally understood the current situation. He looked at Tianyang, who was smiling faintly. He realized what he was about to say. "Greetings, Master." End of chapter. Chapter 1588. "Greetings, Master." Lin Shan practically squeezed out these words through gritted teeth. After half a day of planning, they had summoned dozens of Saint Emperor Heaven Prides and easily found Haoman's men. The first half of the plan was so perfect that even Lin Shan found it unbelievable. But the entire plan was completely changed when Haoman's men appeared. In an instant, they suppressed everyone, disrupted the assassination, and enslaved him. The entire process took less than 3 minutes and was completed in one go. He went from being the second in command of the Zhongshuan demon sect's younger generation to a servant who was supposed to be the target of the siege. "Not bad." Tianyang nodded casually. "Now go to a safe place and recover your primordial spirit. Return to the Zhongshuan demon sect after the Heaven Pride tournament and pass on the information to me." Tianyang had nothing better to do than to take in a servant who wanted to kill him. He had used him on Yun Xianyuan because he wanted to use him to deal with the Xianyuan family. Who would have thought that the Xianyuan family would be so ruthless that they would abandon their saintess and even kill Yin Xuanyuan's parents? Lin Shan's value was just that. As an information collector, he just needed to pass on information regularly. Tianyang would only bring him along if he was crazy. His servant's life or death would not affect him anyway. "Yes, Master." Lin Shan stood up and said respectfully. He was a member of the demon sect after all. Face was just a bargaining chip. He had used it when he was suppressed to see if it could move the other party. Now that he couldn't move the other party, Lin Shan immediately abandoned this useless thing. A wise man submits to circumstances. For a member of the demon sect who had a bad reputation, he naturally had to remember this. Tianyang was also used to such occurrences and did not find it strange. He waved his hand casually, and Lin Shan immediately went far away. Tianyang's figure flashed as his spirit returned to his body. The day and night in the burial valley are 72 hours. The biggest difference is 8 hours. It has been more than 40 hours since the last time it suddenly became day. In other words, in at most 16 to 18 hours, this burial valley will once again become night. The Tianyang didn't have much interest in the treasures in Sinecure Valley anymore. His physical body and divine soul had basically reached the limits of what he could achieve at the moment. Something like true essence could not be forced, and Tianyang did not really care about it. The secret would only be revealed at night in Burial Valley. At that moment, outside Lingyun Peak, in the various forces. Dozens of soul lamps went out at the same time. Ancient Tao sect. 3 soul lamps went out at the same time. The ancient Tao sect didn't care about the other 2, but one of them belonged to the third-ranked radiant flame heavenly monarch, Zhao Kongyan. Why is Zhao Kongyan's soul lamp extinguished? The face of the elder guarding the soul lamp hall changed dramatically. It was almost impossible for Zhao Kongyan to pose much of a threat at the prodigy competition. Moreover, he had the life-saving token given by the Realm Lord's envoy. Even if something did happen, there was no way he wouldn't have enough time to escape, unless it was someone else's doing. Immediately, the elder's expression became serious. His figure flashed, and he went to the ancient Tao sect's sect master's mansion. The death of Zhao Kongyan, who possessed the radiant flame heavenly monarch physique, was definitely a major event that would shake the entire ancient Tao sect. Tianyang didn't know that his massacre had already attracted the attention of a few sections. He just didn't know who was behind it. He had been waiting bitterly in Burial Valley for a long time, and the moment of night had finally arrived. The sun seemed to be devoured by something and rapidly fell to the ground. The Green Mountain Tianyang was on also rapidly sank like yesterday. It turned into an abyss, and at the same time, endless death energy spewed out from the abyss. Although the deathly aura was indeed spreading from the abyss, the speed at which it spread was too fast. In almost an instant, it covered the entire Burial Valley. If it weren't for the fact that Tianyang had already formed a preliminary divine Tao law, he would have thought that the death energy was produced by the 4 corners of Burial Valley. What exactly is in this abyss? He immediately released his immortal divine flame and ignited all the death energy around him. However, although Tianyang had some experience with this, he still didn't dare rashly absorb the death energy into his body. Tianyang had basically killed everyone who dared to show their faces in Burial Valley, leaving only one person who hadn't made a move. This time, it was the time of the burial of heaven and earth, so there wasn't such a good place to vent. However, Tianyang didn't find any important information when he used his immortal divine flame to scan the depths of the abyss. Even if he'd reached the divine soul level, it was nothing in front of the abyss. It wasn't much different from half-step divine soul. Looks like I'll have to go down myself, Heavenly Son muttered to himself. Then he activated his undying force, and undying divine flames began to burn. Around Tianyang, a domineering, undying divine flame domain was formed. Then it charged downwards rapidly. Roar! Just as Tianyang reached the same place he'd been the day before, a furious roar rang out again. Like the black gold skeletal dragon from before, this one was made of white bones without a trace of flesh or blood. What burned in its eye sockets wasn't soul fire, but death energy. It was similar to the guardian of the abyss, but this time, it was a tiger-shaped demonic beast. Scram! Tianyang didn't have time to waste on these bones. His immortal divine flame turned into a long whip and viciously swept it across the skeletal tiger. Although the skeletal tiger's body didn't change, the death energy in its eye sockets vanished. A few seconds later, the skeletal tiger turned into a pile of powerless bones and fell to the ground. The immortal bloodline seems to be quite effective against the death energy. Tianyang raised an eyebrow when he noticed this. As long as it was an enemy related to the death energy, a single blow from his immortal divine flame would defeat most of them. However, Tianyang sensed that there wasn't a trace of the immortal bloodline's aura in this Burial Valley. It wasn't very likely that an inheritor of the immortal bloodline would die here. Tianyang then went deeper. However, the deeper he went, the stronger the pressure from Tianyang's immortal divine flame became. After tens of thousands of meters, the death energy didn't condense into a solid form, but the pressure was extremely great. If it weren't for the immortal bloodline going berserk and strengthening the immortal divine flame, Tianyang wouldn't have been able to come here. I'm almost at the bottom. Tianyang's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately sped up. The abyss formed by the surrounding mountains had already stopped at a floating place. Tianyang immediately arrived at an extremely open area. Then he looked down. He saw a giant. He slowly exhaled. End of chapter. Chapter 1589. It was a giant. He was about 1,000 feet tall, but his body proportions were the same as a normal person's. If not for Tianyang's powerful senses, he would have thought that he was a normal human being. His face was resolute and could be considered handsome. His eyes were closed as if he was asleep. His chest was slowly sinking, but it was very subtle. Tianyang had to observe for a while before he could see it. Terrifying, deathly aura exhaled from the giant's nostrils. The airflow was calm, but the moment it left the giant's body, it turned into a turbulent, deathly aura. The deathly aura here was the most terrifying. Could it be? Tianyang was incredulous. The deathly aura in Burial Valley is reincarnated because of this giant's breath. When he breathed, heaven and earth would be buried, and the deathly aura would cover the sky. When he breathed, all life would be revived, and life would spread. A single breath from a giant could create the most terrifying mini-world in Lingyun Peak. The giant was still lying on the ground with his eyes closed. Tianyang was about to take a step forward. However, in an instant, a terrifying aura pressed down on Tianyang. Creak! Bang! Tianyang's bones were crushed in an instant, and his divine soul was under immense pressure. Tianyang spat out a mouthful of blood. At this moment, his eyes also turned blood red. The immortal fire burned and repaired Tianyang's body. The immortal blood and immortal body worked at the same time, and Tianyang's body was restored to its original state in an instant. Tianyang took another step forward. However, as soon as he took this step, the aura seemed to be several times stronger, and Tianyang's body was crushed again. Boom! The indestructible bone didn't even have the slightest ability to resist. Like glass, it directly turned into countless fragments. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere. In the blink of an eye, Tianyang's body disappeared. Even Tianyang's divine soul almost couldn't hold on. Then, the immortal fire burned again. At the same time, Tianyang reformed again. If I'd known, I wouldn't have used the immortal fire to burn myself to death. It would have been much faster to use the giant's aura. Tianyang's mouth twitched, but even so, he still took another step forward. Boom! Boundless aura pressed down again. Tianyang's face twisted, and his arms trembled. The immortal blood coursed through his body. His entire body turned blood red in an instant. Tianyang's expression didn't change as he took another step forward in a flash. Boom! This time, the immortal's divine immortal body. Furthermore, the speed of recovery this time was countless times faster than before. The cultivation method of the indestructible body was very simple. All one needed to do was to continuously destroy oneself and rebuild it. That would be enough. To sum it up, it could be summed up in these few words. However, these few words represented countless life and death encounters. The immortal fire wouldn't activate the immortal blood's rebirth from a drop of blood. However, it had to be activated at the moment of complete destruction. Otherwise, Tianyang's body would die. Tianyang had to control the timing and strength countless times to find the moment of life and death. In less than half a day in Burial Valley, he had repeated life and death hundreds of times, no, thousands of times. It was all for the sake of making himself a little bit stronger. I'm used to this. Heavenly Sun let out a hearty laugh as the undying divine flame surged. The immortal fire burst out and repaired his body. It wasn't just the immortal body. His flesh was emitting powerful light. Both the indestructible blood and indestructible bone were releasing mysterious light that seemed to come from the ancient times, just when Tianyang himself hadn't sensed it. The endless death chi around Tianyang poured into Tianyang's body as Tianyang's body was broken and repaired. Tianyang grinned as he looked at the giant in front of him, who still looked like he was sleeping peacefully. Dead man, don't even think about killing me. In the next moment, Tianyang took 3 steps forward, but this time the power was at least 30 times stronger. But Tianyang still stood in place, back straight, legs straight, and the immortal body running wildly. Using the immortal fire to train the immortal body was very effective. But in this environment, This was the best time for the immortal body to grow. But at this moment, the giant's breath sped up a little. This little bit. It turned into a majestic death chi that surged toward Tianyang. To be precise, this death chi was just flowing in all directions. But a part of it flowed toward Tianyang. However, Tianyang's indestructible body also became riddled with holes in an instant. So powerful. Seeing this, Tianyang immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. He had used the undying divine flame to isolate himself from the deathly aura. One breath, one tide of death chi. Countless forces in the Lingfeng realm were horrified. They knew how terrifying Burial Valley was, but they still didn't dare to come and get rid of it. Even the mysterious realm Lord couldn't get rid of it. He couldn't even figure it out. What cultivation level did this giant have? At this moment, Tianyang took another step forward. The oppressive might in the surroundings grew even stronger, but Tianyang still managed to hold on. His physical strength didn't change much under this pressure, but the immortal body and the entire immortal divine body. Under this pressure, they all became countless times stronger. So much so that just one step couldn't do much to Tianyang. But the closer he got to the giant, the thicker the death chi became. The immortal fire could still ignite it, but it was much more difficult to use it as fuel. It started to consume true yuan. Tianyang frowned. If this goes on, even if the Chaos Origin has a lot of true yuan, it won't last long. Plus, there's a time limit in Burial Valley at night. Looks like I have to end this quickly. In the next moment, the immortal force surged. The immortal origin appeared in a flash. In this place, the boundless expanse origin source would be completely suppressed. Only during the day, where there was no death chi, could the boundless expanse 9 transformations be executed. But Tianyang didn't have everything except the vast expanse 9 changes. It was the best thing to use in this environment. Of course, it was 9 steps of death. Tianyang roared. Streams of death chi erupted from Tianyang's body. In the next moment, he turned into a phantom and took 9 steps. Streams of death chi stacked on top of Tianyang's body. 9 steps, but he crossed a lot. Tianyang arrived in front of the giant. However, upon reaching that place, Tianyang discovered that the oppressive might had all disappeared. However, there was also a seemingly supreme pressure that was surging towards him. This is the Emperor's might. End of chapter. Chapter 1590. The might of an emperor. In the Heavens Expanse Saint Palace, Tianyang had once felt this powerful pressure. It was vast and majestic. If not for the fact that there was not much pressure, Tianyang would have been turned into minced meat under the might of an emperor. At this moment, the giant's corpse was also emitting the powerful aura of a monarch. This pressure was like the might of heaven and earth. It was as if the entire world was pressing down on Tianyang's body. However, there was not much pressure. It only gave Tianyang a feeling that he had to worship this corpse. Tianyang was still standing where he was, quietly looking at the giant's corpse. This emperor was already dead. There was no doubt about it. Tianyang could not feel any spiritual fluctuation from his corpse. Even if he used his divine Tao law to sense it, it was still the same. The only reason it was still breathing was that its soul was already dead, but its physical body was still there. The aura in its body had already turned into a deathly aura. However, this body was still alive. Even if the deathly aura had already occupied the entire body, and even if a part of it had escaped, it could still turn the entire Burial Valley into a deathly aura. An emperor has actually died here. At this moment, the demonized Heavens Expanse Saint Spirit was also alarmed. Facing such a powerful being, even she did not dare to be presumptuous. An emperor was the most powerful being in the godly state. It was said to be the top of the world. For an emperor to die, other than the great divine demon war in the primordial age, the demonized Heavens Expanse Saint Spirit could not think of any other reason. Even the Heavens Expanse Emperor was not sure if he was still alive. Tianyang did not reply. Instead, he quietly took another step forward. Waves of strong, deathly aura circled around his body. It was accumulated by the 9 steps of death. A part of it touched the skin of the emperor's corpse. In the next moment, the immortal bloodline in Tianyang's body suddenly went berserk. Tianyang's pupils contracted. He immediately released his divine spirit power, preparing to suppress the berserk immortal bloodline. At the same time, he looked at the emperor's corpse. The martial monarch's corpse suddenly changed its appearance. Its skin began to emit a golden glow. Is this corpse related to the immortal bloodline? Tianyang immediately thought of this. At this moment, in an instant, the corpse turned into an extremely brilliant golden color. The death aura that he breathed out also stopped at this moment. He gradually flew up and floated from the bottom of Burial Valley. Then, he was pushed to the ground by an invisible force. It looked as if he had come back from the dead. What is this? Seeing that, Tianyang's expression changed greatly. At that moment, the corpse opened its eyes. There seemed to be endless divine scriptures flowing in his eyes. Brilliant golden flames burned on the body of the corpse. However, he did not come back from the dead. As the corpses stood up, terrifying auras replaced the aura of death that they had exhaled earlier and occupied the entire abyss. Even Tianyang could not resist this terrifying martial monarch aura. However, the corpse's divine spirit still did not exist. The only reason it stood up was because Tianyang seemed to have triggered some kind of restriction. This martial monarch was hundreds of feet tall. Although he was standing on the ground, if Tianyang was not flying, he would not even be able to see the martial monarch's face. However, after the corpse opened its eyes, its face seemed to have become even more vivid. It was resolute and burly, but its body was not very muscular. Although it did not have a divine spirit, its eyes were still bright. Perhaps this person was also a martial Tao war god when he was alive. At this moment, Tianyang suddenly realized that the rampaging immortal bloodline in his body had suddenly calmed down. As for the martial monarch, a brilliant golden light appeared between his eyebrows. Following that, the raging flames burning all over his body instantly surged towards the golden light. The golden light was dazzling and released heavy pressure. Tianyang's immortal eyes could not look directly at this terrifying golden light. He could only close his eyes and sense it with his divine spirit. In just a few seconds, the golden light that had swallowed all the golden flames gradually disappeared. A drop of golden blood floated in front of the corpse's eyebrows. Blood! Seeing this, Tianyang was stunned. Was it only a drop of blood that caused such a big commotion? In the next moment, the drop of golden blood suddenly unleashed terrifying auras. This was not just the pressure of the martial monarch from before. It also had layers of bloodline pressure that came from the same source as Tianyang's immortal bloodline. Boom! Tianyang's head exploded. The pressure from the bloodline almost made him kneel down and worship this supreme martial monarch with the immortal bloodline. However, Tianyang stood in midair and gritted his teeth. The immortal bloodline was raging, but his true essence was still flowing. The 10 origins erupted at the same time. It directly resisted the pressure and made Tianyang stand in midair. Why does this thing in the Burial Valley like to make people kneel? The corner of Tianyang's mouth twitched. He looked at the golden blood that was releasing endless pressure in front of him. In his heart, he guessed the origin of this golden blood. This might be the legacy blood that this martial monarch had left behind when he was alive. Boom! Another loud sound was heard. However, this time, it came from the emperor's corpse. Strange runes appeared on the body of the corpse. The head, chest, torso, limbs, and every inch of the skin was covered by the strange golden runes. Boom! Another loud sound rang out. Rays of light suddenly burst out from the monarch's body. His body also began to crack as light shot out from within. At this moment, his entire body collapsed. What the F***CK? Seeing this, Tianyang was stunned. At this moment, the martial monarch's corpse was completely destroyed and disappeared. Endless death chi rushed towards Tianyang. However, before it could destroy Tianyang, the light in the martial monarch's body devoured it. Then, this light was injected into the golden blood in front of Tianyang. The immortal bloodline in Tianyang's body also surged crazily at this moment. This is the martial monarch's blood, the demonized, vast expanse Holy Spirit murmured. Then, as if he felt endless pressure, his expression changed, and he hurriedly returned to Tianyang's Vientiane sky market. Even if the vast expanse Holy Spirit lent her all his power, it would still be the same. However, the strange thing was that Ling Yuhan, who came out with the demonized vast expanse Holy Spirit to check on the situation, did not change much after the light was injected into the drop of golden blood. The martial monarch's blood. Perhaps it could be called the immortal emperor's blood? Tianyang smiled and reached out his hand. The drop of golden immortal emperor's blood suddenly shook. It turned into a ray of light and shot towards the center of Tianyang's brows. Instantly, the immortal bloodline was boiling. In Tianyang's soul ocean, a majestic voice sounded. I, Emperor Kangwu. End of chapter. Chapter 1591. I, Emperor Tsongwu. An incomparably powerful voice sounded in Tianyang's mind. Tianyang immediately understood that this was the memories of the Emperor Tsongwu's corpse that had just collapsed in the golden blood. My name is Tian Kangwu, a direct descendant of the undying heavenly venerate. After 100 battles, I became Wuzun. After 1,000 battles, I stepped into the sage realm. After 10,000 battles, I was undefeated and became a sacred emperor. I fought in life and death. Except for the final battle, I never lost. After 100,000 battles, I became a god. After 1,000,000 battles, I became an emperor. Hearing this, Tianyang's heart trembled. It wasn't a matter of how old he was, how old he was, how old he was, how old he was, how old he was. Instead, it was a matter of measuring the time he took to improve his strength through battles. Just this boldness alone was enough to shock the world. I once controlled the undying imperial court and cultivated the undying divine body. I wanted to break through the emperor realm and step into the undying heavenly venerate's supreme realm. Unfortunately, the undying divine body was created by the undying heavenly venerate. It was incomparably profound and difficult to reach the peak. Therefore, I killed myself in the Lingyun Peak, wanting to turn into endless death chi and use the Tao of death to prove the Tao of immortality. Hearing this, Tianyang was stunned. From this tone, it seemed that the Lingyun Peak had a high status in the heart of Emperor Tsongwu, who had already become an imperial emperor. However, according to the legends of the Lingyun realm, the Lingyun Peak was created by an imperial emperor. Since they were both imperial emperors, why did Emperor Tsongwu have to be so respectful? However, this drop of blood wasn't a fragment of Emperor Tsongwu's soul. Emperor Tsongwu had died a long time ago. Apart from his physical body, which was still breathing death in the burial valley, he had changed the world. His soul had been completely obliterated by the endless years. Perhaps he had completely died in the only battle he had lost. Unfortunately, one of my subjects was already disloyal. He took advantage of the time when I was training in my life or death exchange to launch a sneak attack. In the end, I died with hatred in my heart, leaving only a shell in the Lingyun Peak. It's a pity that I didn't complete the last part of the immortal divine body. Now, I'll leave the entire immortal divine body in this blood. When the direct descendants of the immortal heavenly sovereign arrive, I'll give it to them. Hopefully, the immortal imperial court will return to the heavens by then. Emperor Kangwu's voice came to a stop at this point. However, Tianyang's expression gradually changed. In Burial Valley, heaven and earth were buried day and night. The aura of death covered the sky because Emperor Tsongwu's corpse was still breathing. A sovereign emperor was an existence that was only a step away from surpassing the divine realm. Although his divine soul had already fallen, his body was still indestructible. In the divine world, the increase in lifespan brought by one's cultivation didn't change much. The reason Tianyang saw sage, emperors, and great sages that were much younger than the Tianshao Great World was because the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the divine world was incomparably strong. However, while the environment of the divine world could raise a person's lower limit, It couldn't change their upper limit if they couldn't reach a higher realm. What realm was 100 years old? What realm was 100,000 years old? In the Xintian Great World, a peak heavenly great sage like Xianyuan Changsheng could cultivate in seclusion for 10 million years. Although he had broken through to half-holy emperor midway, it also proved that a half-holy emperor's lifespan was much longer than 10 million years. Half-holy emperor, heavenly emperor, demigod, god realm, sovereign emperor. There was a difference of 3 major realms in between. Lifespan wasn't just multiplied by 3. Emperor Tsang-Wu's divine soul had perished, but it was normal for his body to exist for so long. However, Heavenly Son hadn't expected that the source of such a vast amount of death chi in Burial Valley was actually Emperor Lord Kangwa's attempt to kill him. He'd used his undying essence to create boundless death chi, which he'd then used to create a supreme, undying Tao. It was an easy thought to come up with. The cultivation of the undying body was to constantly destroy oneself and rebuild oneself. Through this, one could become stronger. However, thinking about it was one thing, and doing it was another. Perhaps only Emperor Tsang-Wu, who had stepped into the Imperial Emperor realm and was restricted by the Imperial Emperor realm for a long time, would dare to do such a crazy thing. Unfortunately, although Emperor Tsang-Wu's courage was shocking, he was interfered with at the crucial moment by the undying Emperor's traitors and killed. If it wasn't for the fact that Emperor Tsang-Wu's divine soul was extremely weak because he was on the verge of death, he wouldn't have been able to keep his corpse. It's a pity that the undying Emperor's surname isn't Tian anymore. Tianyang shook his head and sighed softly. As for what happened after that, Tianyang gave it some thought, and he should be able to make a rough guess. Because of Emperor Tsang-Wu's death, the undying Emperor's traitors naturally ascended the throne and became the new ruler of the undying Emperor clan. Emperor Tsang-Wu's clansmen, who were the direct descendants of the undying heavenly sovereign, were naturally suppressed endlessly. In the end, they were even forced out of the divine world and came to the Tianshao Great World. It was unknown how many unforeseen events happened, which resulted in the Tian family in the Tianshao Great World becoming just one of the 8 great families in the small northern desolate region's Blizzard Empire. The original undying bloodline had long been diluted to the point that it was unrecognizable. It seems like when Tian Hao awakened his undying bloodline, he also awakened the memories related to it. Otherwise, how would he know about such things that happened in the divine world? Tianyang muttered to himself, but he didn't feel too much in his heart. Cultivating, becoming stronger, betraying, dying with hatred. In the martial world, there were simply too many of such things. After seeing so many of them, one would naturally get used to it. However, although Emperor Tsang-Wu's final words had ended, the information contained in the drop of undying Emperor blood was far from over. Most of it was related to the undying Emperor clan. Emperor Tsang-Wu might have thought that the direct descendants of the Tian clan would be able to make a comeback or find his corpse and become the new ruler of the undying Emperor clan. However, it was unknown how many tens of thousands of years later that Tianyang found it. However, there was still a portion of information that couldn't be underestimated. In other words, it wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was extremely important. The complete cultivation technique of the undying divine body. The undying eyes, the initial awakening of the undying bloodline, the mastery of the undying divine flame. The undying bones, the creation of the undying skeleton, the foundation of the undying divine body. The undying blood, the refinement of the bloodline, the rebirth from a drop of blood, the key chapter of the undying divine body. The undying body, the true forging chapter of the undying divine body. Cultivating the undying body to the extreme, the heavenly lightning and earthly fire wouldn't extinguish, and the undying body wouldn't be destroyed even after 10,000 tribulations. Tianyang had already grasped all of these. The only thing he lacked was the last chapter, which was also the most important chapter to transform from undying to undying. The Undying Soul. End of chapter. Chapter 1592. Immortal Soul. The first 4 chapters were all about cultivating the immortal bloodline and using it to strengthen the physical body. However, there was a fatal flaw. In terms of the physical body, it was extremely strong and could be called immortal. However, in terms of the divine soul, there was no protection. If Tianyang did not have the Tsang Emperor Sword fragment and the immortal will, he would have died at the hands of the immortal prince. The immortal divine body that he had cultivated previously was useless. Now he could only become stronger by condensing the divine soul to prevent someone from killing Tianyang through the weakness of the divine soul. Up until now, there had not been such an existence. Even the strongest opponent he had met, Deng Zhongquan, was only able to destroy the immortal body. It was still far from attacking the divine soul. However, this was still a huge weakness. With the blood rebirth and the immortal body, as long as the physical body reached a certain level, it could be called immortal. However, as long as there was a weakness in the divine soul, the condensed divine body could not be called the immortal divine body. Now, the appearance of the immortal soul made up for this weakness. Immortal soul, immortal divine soul, immortal divine body, indestructible and immortal. A few simple words explain the indestructible soul and the entire immortal divine body. Immortal and indestructible. However, just as Tianyang was about to continue exploring the mystery, a piercing pain that seemed to come from the divine soul forced Tianyang to withdraw his divine soul. It was as if he only needed to take one more step, and this piercing pain would tear his soul apart. Looks like I can't cultivate it now. Tianyang smiled bitterly and withdrew his divine soul. Tianyang had not even cultivated the immortal body to the complete realm. It was normal that he could not cultivate the immortal soul. However, although he could not cultivate the immortal soul, Tianyang still carefully studied the first 4 chapters of the immortal divine body. Immortal eye, immortal bone, immortal blood, immortal body. Tianyang had already cultivated all of them. Other than the indestructible body, he had cultivated all of them to perfection. However, those were all cultivated from scattered bones, and there was still a difference between them and the complete immortal divine body. Some of the connections were unknown to Tianyang. Apart from that, there were other subtle differences. After all, Emperor Kangwu was the ancestor of the Tianyang. It was unknown how many years ago he was. After so many years of inheritance, the immortal divine body had naturally improved a lot. Therefore, even though the immortal divine body that Tianyang cultivated was not the same, it could still be compared, used as a reference, and improved. Tianyang sat cross-legged at the bottom of Burial Valley and cultivated. The deathly aura around him was constantly being ignited by Tianyang. Some of the death energy entered Tianyang's body and became a part of his undying bloodline. However, this time, the death chi did not cause any riots. Instead, it turned into the power of the undying bloodline and circulated in Tianyang's body. While Tianyang was cultivating in Burial Valley, a ray of sunlight suddenly appeared on the horizon. The deathly aura surging from the bottom of the abyss formed by the Green Mountain suddenly calmed down. Many people in the safe zone looked up at the sky in puzzlement. Day and night in Burial Valley had always been sudden sunrise, followed by night. There had never been a situation like today where the sun appeared normally. Moreover, as time passed, the deathly aura that was thicker than any cloud layer gradually thinned. Several hours passed. The sun hung high in the sky. The deathly aura had all but vanished. It had only been 40 hours since the previous night. Looking at the sun in the sky, some people took the risk of flying out of the safe zone. When they saw that there was no danger, they suddenly had a thought. After today, their experiences in Burial Valley might no longer be of any use. As time passed, Tianyang gradually recovered from his cultivation state. After all, he still couldn't cultivate the undying soul. Tianyang estimated that he would only be able to truly cultivate it after he reached the God realm. However, after obtaining the complete version of Emperor Kangwu's undying divine body, Tianyang's understanding of the undying body had deepened. Although his physical strength hadn't changed much, Tianyang's future cultivation of the undying divine body would be smoother after completing the connecting parts of the first 4 chapters of the undying divine body. I reckon the first round of the Tournament of Prodigies is about to end, Tianyang muttered to himself. Although he wasn't sure how long this round of cultivation would take, it definitely wouldn't be short. Then Tianyang stood up. A streak of golden light flashed across his skin as he looked up at the sky. The deathly aura that had covered the entire sky had dissipated. It was as if the terrifying deathly aura that had buried heaven and earth had never existed in Burial Valley. It had existed in the past, but now and in the future it would no longer exist. However, it's still worth collecting the treasures in the Valley of Burial. Tianyang smiled faintly as he rose into the air and continued to search the Green Mountains. Although the treasures in Burial Valley were born from the natural spirit chi of Burial Valley, they've been contaminated by the deathly aura over and over again because Emperor Kangwa's corpse was still breathing. This piece of land had almost been assimilated by the deathly aura. The treasures that grew here would also have some deathly aura, which was why Tianyang was so interested. It's Haomen's Yang Tian. Just as Tianyang landed in front of a treasure, the cultivator who was about to make a move on the treasure was horrified. What? Yang Tian? Didn't he die in the battle with the Sangshuan demon sect? Everyone's expression changed drastically when they heard this. None of them had seen the battle with their own eyes. All the news came from word of mouth. Dozens of Saint Emperors, including many peak Saint Emperors, had surrounded and killed the people from Haomen. But in the end, apart from Lin Shan of the Sangshuan demon sect, all the other geniuses had disappeared without a trace. Most likely, they had been forced by Yang Tian to the point where they had no choice but to crush their life-saving tokens and teleport away. However, they had also lost the right to participate in the Prodigy Tournament. Because Lin Shan was still alive, everyone thought that Yang Tian had died long ago. But now, Tianyang ignored the gazes around him and casually collected the decent herb. Then, a man suddenly rushed out from the crowd. Lin Shan. Someone recognized the man's face at first glance and exclaimed, "Is he here for revenge?" However, Lin Shan slowed down when he arrived in front of Tianyang. Then, he knelt on one knee in front of Tianyang. "Welcome out of seclusion, master." End of chapter. Chapter 1593. I am Lin Shan. Welcome out of seclusion, master. Lin Shan, dressed in black, knelt on one knee and said respectfully. Hearing this, Tianyang raised his eyebrows and looked at this shameless traitor. "I just came out of seclusion and didn't inform you. Why are you here already?" Tianyang was a little curious. Could it be that this traitor had used some kind of method to track him down? "I am connected to Master's body and soul. I am following Master's soul," Lin Shan said respectfully with his head still lowered. Hearing this, Tianyang raised his eyebrows and immediately understood. Part of this guy's soul origin was in Tianyang's body. In addition, Tianyang had branded a slave mark in his soul. This formed a two-way connection. As long as Tianyang didn't seal it, Lin Shan could find him quickly. However, he was probably the only one who would use this method to curry favor, as expected of a disciple of the demonic sect. However, Tianyang couldn't be bothered with Lin Shan. They both had a slave mark, but Lin Shan wasn't as important as Yun Xinyuan. "Have you done what I asked you to do?" Tianyang asked calmly. Lin Shan lowered his head and said respectfully, "I've done some of it. The rest of the mission can only continue after the first round is over." Tianyang nodded slightly. "Then there's nothing for you to do." Then he waved his hand casually. Lin Shan immediately obeyed and left in a flash. He knew that he was just a tool to be used by Tianyang. However, his soul origin was still in Tianyang's hands. The slave mark in his soul was still glowing. It was obviously unrealistic for him to resist. However, the cultivators were already shocked by the fact that Yang Tian was still in Burial Valley were completely dumbfounded when they saw this. They thought that Tianyang was dead or had crushed the token because Lin Shan, the leader of the attack on Tianyang, was still alive. Not only was he alive, but he was also doing all sorts of things in Burial Valley. If Tianyang was still here, with Tianyang's strength and temperament. How could he allow Lin Shan to act so arrogantly? Now it seems, Yang Tian was even more ruthless than they had imagined. Lin Shan, the number 2 of the younger generation of the Sanchuan demon sect and one of the top 1,000 on the True Dragon roll, had become Yang Tian's servant. So, after casually chasing Lin Shan away, Tianyang raised his head and looked at all the cultivators who were in a state of shock. Are you all staying here because you want to try crushing this safety token? Just as Tianyang came out of seclusion and swept through the entire Sinecure Valley with the force of a hurricane. In the other small worlds, there were also many people who rose to prominence. Zhao Kongyan's soul lamp extinguished and his soul tablet shattered. He's deader than dead? An elegant blue-haired man stood in the air, surrounded by cultivators who didn't dare to raise their heads and could only walk with their backs bowed. This person was the strongest disciple of the ancient Tao sect, Sheng Qingzi. Given Zhao Kongyan's strength, even the most dangerous Sinecure Valley shouldn't be able to do anything to him. Zhao Kongyan should be able to survive the first 10 seconds of the Sinecure Valley's Sinecure Valley with his bright fire king body. Given that the ancient Tao sect has already collected the coordinates of hundreds of safe places, he should be able to reach them even if he is teleported to any corner. Sheng Qingzi said indifferently. Then, he put away the communication token that had already dimmed from the forceful transmission of information to Lingyun Peak. In other words, someone dared to look down on the ancient Tao sect and kill their 3rd disciple of the younger generation. This person can't be weak. Otherwise, even if Zhao Kongyan is seriously injured, he should be able to crush this safety token. How could a young genius who was close to the demigod realm and whose strength had already reached the demigod realm not even have the chance to crush a token to escape? Instant kill. However, Sheng Qingzi didn't have much confidence in instantly killing Zhao Kongyan. That clown from Haomen is definitely not him. Given his ability, he would have to run away like a rat if he encountered Zhao Kongyan. In other words, it can only be the Sky Cloud Hall and the Zhongshuan demon sect. A cold light flashed in Sheng Qingzi's eyes. He had only joined the ancient Tao sect because of benefits and didn't have much of a sense of identity with the ancient Tao sect. However, if someone dared to kill a disciple of the ancient Tao sect, it was no less than a slap to the face of Sheng Qingzi, the current leader of the ancient Tao sect. Moreover, it wasn't just Zhao Kongyan. There were 2 others who had their soul lamps extinguished and their soul tablets shattered at almost the same time. They couldn't be more dead. Although I don't know who gave you the courage, don't blame me for being merciless if the Sky Cloud Hall and the Zhongshuan demon sect provoke me. Sheng Qingzi said coldly. Green divine veins flowed slowly in his body. Achoo! In another small world, a burly man wearing the uniform of the Sky Cloud Hall suddenly sneezed. What is this? Which beauty is talking about me? The burly man rubbed his nose and pursed his lips. Beside him, Mu Ling looked at the burly man with a dark expression. First senior brother, although you're very strong, you're ugly. Although you're ranked 450th on the True Dragon ranking, you're still ugly. How can there be a beauty talking about you? The burly man flew into a rage. Brat, how dare you tease your first senior brother? If it's not a beauty talking about me, then it's that old fox Sheng Qingzi. Do you believe me? Yes, yes, yes. Mu Ling nodded perfunctorily. But first senior brother, are you sure there's a treasure here? Nonsense. How can the records of the Sky Cloud Hall be wrong? If I'm not wrong, this is where the inheritance of the fallen Emperor Lord is. The burly man pursed his lips. Then, his eyes suddenly turned into the colors of yin and yang. Streaks of mysterious energy swirled around the muscular man's body. Suddenly, the burly man's robe fluttered without any wind and floated up. The surrounding heaven and earth seemed to have changed. Seeing this, Mu Ling's heart skipped a beat. Who would have thought that this ugly guy with a mouth full of flying swords was Tian Suzy, ranked 450th on the True Dragon ranking? Oh no, this is bad. At this moment, the burly man slapped his head. I calculated wrongly. The inheritance of the fallen Emperor Lord should be in the Burial Valley. Mu Ling was speechless. The battles in the Tournament of Prodigies were extremely intense. There were tens of thousands of prodigies participating in the Tournament of Prodigies, and it would take a long time to determine the final 100. However, in less than 2 months, there were people who crushed their safety tokens and were teleported out of the Lingyun Peak. Finally, at the end of the second month, the final 101st person was teleported out. The participants in the various small and medium worlds were frozen in place by their safety tokens. At the same time, they were teleported out. The first round of the Tournament of Prodigies had ended. End of chapter. Chapter 1594. The first round of the Tournament of Geniuses had ended. Following the activation of the tokens, geniuses at the top of the True Dragon ranking, including Sheng Qingzi and Tian Xuanzi, were all imprisoned. Then, they were all sent to the same small world. Tianyang was no exception. At first, he thought that there was something wrong with the safety token and wanted to use the Great Void Sword embryo to destroy it. If the demonized vast expanse, Holy Spirit, did not explain in time, there would only be 99 people left in the Tournament of Geniuses for the final battle. Whoosh! Beams of silver light flashed in the same small world, and the last 100 geniuses on the Lingyun Peak were all sent to an empty small world. Some people, who were still in the middle of the fight a second ago, were inexplicably imprisoned in the next second and then teleported over. Congratulations, the last 100 people have successfully survived the first round of the Tournament of Geniuses and entered the final battle. The Godly State Realm Envoy, who had appeared on the Lingyun Peak 2 months ago and distributed the safety tokens to all the participating geniuses, appeared in front of the crowd. Just like before, he was dressed in a black robe and wore a large black hood, so no one could see his face clearly. However, the godly state aura that he emitted was no longer concealed. The Realm Envoy is in the godly state. Feeling the aura from the Realm Envoy, many people spoke in shock, as if it was the first time they knew about it. No matter how strong the Realm Envoy was, he was only in the godly state and was still a distance away from the Emperor Realm. The Realm Envoy was just an envoy, but there was a godly state. Judging from the aura, it seemed to be quite strong, even though the duration of this genius competition is a lot shorter than the previous one, Qin Nan said with a smile. However, the geniuses that are born are also much stronger. This means that the Lingyun Peak's martial way has improved again, the Realm Envoy said loudly. Strangely, although his voice was very impassioned, the Realm Envoy's black robe seemed to be fixed in that part of the space and did not move at all. However, although the Realm Envoy's behavior was very strange, the other cultivators did not pay much attention to it. Now, the most important thing was the Tournament of Geniuses that was about to begin. This was the reason why these 100 geniuses had fought so hard in the various small and medium worlds. It would determine the ranking of the various factions within the Lingfeng realm, and the prodigies of the various factions who obtained the resources of the Lingfeng realm would compete with each other. At this moment, many people turned their gazes to Tianyang. In the previous 2 Genius Grand competitions, Haomen's performance wasn't too good. Now, they were being attacked by 3 different forces. If they don't get a good ranking in the competition of Heaven's favorites, they will face a disastrous situation. It could be said that this genius tournament was the battle that would determine the survival of Haomen. If he did not have the protection of the Realm Master, Haomen would definitely die under the siege of the 3 great sects. I remember that the reason why Haomen was able to enter the top 50 last time was because they relied on the human wave tactic. During the first round, they hid everywhere and lasted until the Prodigy tournament, where they relied on their numbers to advance. This time, Haomen seems to be alone. The difficulty of entering the top 50 has increased tremendously. Not only that, Haomen is being attacked by the 3 great factions this time. I'm afraid that once the Prodigy tournament starts, he will be killed by the 3 great sex prodigies. Someone could not help but gloat. At this point, everyone was a competitor. These people were naturally very happy that Haomen's people were treated so badly. Although Haomen did not use the human wave tactic this time, with 1 less person, their ranking would move up by 1 place. Lin Shan, how is the Burial Valley? At the Sanchuan demon sect's location, there were still about 5 out of a dozen participants left. Each of them was at least a half-step demigod. The person leading them had already stepped into the demigod realm. On the true dragon roll, even the weakest demigod had the strength of the top 500. Not much has changed, but the harvest is not bad, Lin Shan said. The person leading the Zhongshuan demon sect nodded when he heard this. The burial valley was a dangerous place that had existed for a long time, so it was naturally impossible for there to be any changes. It was already not bad to have any harvest. At the same time, the person leading them also noticed that there seemed to be some changes in Lin Shan, but he did not pay much attention to it. The entire Lingfeng territory forces knew how dangerous the burial valley was, so it was naturally impossible for Lin Shan not to be injured if he had any harvest. That's good. Later, you will deal with Haomen's people, the person leading them said indifferently. As a top genius of the 3 great sects, he naturally did not have the heart to deal with a small Haomen. With the 3 great sects attacking, Haomen's death was almost inevitable after the Prodigy tournament. The person leading the Zhongshuan demon sect could not be bothered to waste time on a dead person. It was not only the Zhongshuan demon sect, but also Sky Cloud Hall and the ancient Dao sect. It was only because Tianyang had something on Sheng Qingzi that Sheng Qingzi would target Tianyang. Or else, given the pride of the 3 great sects' younger generation, they would not bicker with a small Haomen. Hearing this, a strange light flashed across Lin Shan's eyes, but he still nodded. Yes, the leader of the Sky Cloud Hall, Tian Xuanzi, also did not put Tianyang in his eyes. Although Mu Ling had been warning Tianyang about his strength, the entire Sky Cloud Hall did not pay much attention to him. It was even worse than the Zhongshuan demon sect, and they only sent a disciple to deal with him. As for the ancient Dao sect, Sheng Qingzi's eyes were cold as he stared at Tianyang, who had a calm expression. Blazing killing intent surged his eyes. The divine veins in his body were slowly circulating, but Sheng Qingzi had a feeling that they were about to be separated from him. As long as I kill this person, everything will be fine, Sheng Qingzi muttered to himself. As long as he killed Tianyang, no one in the entire divine world would know that he had obtained his sovereign divine veins from someone else except for him and the previous Qingyuan city lord. After entering the small world, Sheng Qingzi released the suppression of his origin energy. Sheng Qingzi had already stepped into the demigod realm. Powerful demigod auras circulated around Sheng Qingzi. The killing intent seemed to have condensed into a solid form as it charged towards Tianyang. Tianyang seemed to have noticed Sheng Qingzi's gaze and turned his head with a smile. Now, the second round of the Tournament of Geniuses, which is also the final round, begins. However, just as Sheng Qingzi was about to react, the Realm Lord Envoy suddenly spoke. The next moment, a huge fighting ring appeared in this small world. Chapter 1595. The first round of the Genius Tournament begins. Following the Realm Lord's shout, a huge arena appeared out of thin air and appeared in the center of the empty small world. The arena was pure white and had a radius of more than 10,000 feet. It could easily accommodate 2 giant demonic beasts. As usual, it's a free-for-all at the beginning of the Genius Tournament. Seeing this, some people's expressions did not change, and they chuckled. Some people breathed a sigh of relief. A free-for-all was less difficult than a one-on-one. After all, in a free-for-all, as long as one's presence was reduced, there was no need to make a move. However, the eyes of the people from the 3 great sects lit up. The corners of their mouths curled into a cruel smile. For the 3 great sects, the most suitable situation for them to hunt down Tianyang was undoubtedly a free-for-all. There was no limit to the opponents in the free-for-all. If the 3 great sects attacked together, Yang Tian would definitely die. The first round is a free-for-all. When the 50th person leaves the arena, the free-for-all will stop. The safety token is still useful at this moment. At a critical moment, you can still crush it and be teleported out. However, the person who crushes the safety token will automatically be demoted to the 100th place. The Realm Lord's envoy said lightly. Hearing this, the people from the 3 great sects smiled even more wildly. Crushing the safety token would automatically demote one to the 100th place. Only the top 50 of the Genius Tournament would be protected by the Realm Lord. Wasn't this forcing the people of Howman to fight to the death? It's not easy for the House sect to produce a genius who can enter the fighting segment of the grand competition of the geniuses. However, this rule is extremely scary. Hearing this, someone sighed and looked at Tianyang, who had a normal expression. A man's wealth is his own ruin. Howman has such a precious treasure but refuses to hand it over. It's very normal for the three great sects to target him and let his genius die. Someone sneered. Then, with a leap, he stepped onto the arena. Then, almost at the same time, the 100 geniuses present also flew onto the arena. Each of the three great sects had more than 5 people left. Even if the strongest few didn't make a move, there were still more than 10 people left. The moment Tianyang stepped onto the stage, these people rushed out and surrounded him. As soon as the battle began, Tianyang would be heavily surrounded by them. Seeing this, many people sighed, thinking that Howman had lost all hope. Tianyang, on the other hand, raised his eyelids and looked at the people around him indifferently. Apart from Lin Shan and Mu Ling, the rest of the cultivators were no match for Zhao Kongyan, the heavenly king of flames of the Burial Valley. There's a path to heaven, but you don't want to take it. There's no door to hell, but you barge your way in. If you had crushed your life-saving medallion in the first round of the Tournament of Prodigies, you might have been able to keep your life. Who knows? Maybe the three great sects will be merciful and save your life. However, you dared to offend eldest senior brother Sheng Qingzi and even dared to step onto the stage of the Prodigy Tournament. Now that the three great sects have joined forces, with your pathetic strength, I'm afraid you won't even have the chance to crush your life-saving medallion. How about it? Do you regret it now? The ancient Tao sect disciple mocked. In his eyes, Tianyang was already a corpse. Beside them, apart from Lin Shan and Mu Ling, the disciples of the three major sects also wore mocking expressions. In their eyes, Tianyang couldn't escape from their grasp. Not bad. Tianyang chuckled when he heard this. At that moment, the Realm Master's emissary swept his gaze across the area and shouted, "Battle Royale, begin!" A loud shout rang out, and in the next moment, everyone on the martial arts stage began to move. Most of them looked for the furthest corner from the battlefield to prevent being accidentally knocked out of the stage. However, there was also a portion that looked for an opponent and directly attacked. Wild Wind Sword Strike. The Sky Cloud Hall disciple roared. His vigorous inner yuan condensed into a sword of wind and ruthlessly slashed at Tianyang. Dark Imprisonment. The Canshuan Demon Sect disciple was not to be outdone. His black inner yuan circulated, and layers of imprisonment power surged toward Tianyang. At the same time, countless sword lights, saber lights, fist marks, lightning, flames, and gales ruthlessly attacked Tianyang. Howman had the inheritance of the heavens, expanse, Emperor Lord. It was not an ordinary Emperor Lord treasure, nor was it an incomplete cultivation technique. It was the complete inheritance of the heavens, expanse Emperor. Whoever obtained it could become the next heavens, expanse Emperor Lord. How could these cultivators possibly resist such a great temptation? The moment the battle royale began, they unleashed their strongest attack. Even if they couldn't obtain the inheritance of the heavens expanse Emperor Lord, they could still kill Yang Tian and ask for a reward from the sect or Sheng Qingzi. Given the strength of the sect and Sheng Qingzi, any opportunity given to them would be endlessly beneficial. In an instant, Heavenly Sun's surroundings were filled with countless violent attacks. This Howman is really a target of public criticism. Seeing this, someone couldn't help but chuckle and say, he was surrounded by more than 10 people as soon as he appeared. Such a situation rarely happened in the Prodigy Tournament. However, he has the inheritance of the Heavens Expanse Emperor, but doesn't have the strength to match it. He can only survive by relying on conditional protection. It's normal for him to be targeted like this. Someone smiled faintly. It's a pity that this guy is going to die here today. Hearing this, everyone's heart trembled. It seemed that Haomen's Yang Tian was really going to die, because the person who spoke was Feng Wuji of the Sky Cloud Hall. Although Feng Wuji was the strongest disciple of the Sky Cloud Hall, he didn't cultivate the Sky Cloud's sacred art, the legacy cultivation technique of the Sky Cloud Hall. Instead, he obtained another cultivation technique from somewhere. This cultivation technique was strange and inexplicable, and it seemed to control a trace of the power of destiny. As a result, Feng Wuji was plagued with bad luck, and his originally handsome appearance became extremely ugly. However, this power of destiny also greatly strengthened Feng Wuji's combat strength, so much so that he was almost confident in predicting the future. Feng Wuji said, "The fate of Haomen's people was sealed." Boom, boom. Countless attacks tore open a ferocious Feng and charged towards Tianyang. Seeing this, the corners of Tianyang's mouth curled up slightly, revealing a faint smile. "Is this all you've got?" Then, with Tianyang as the center, terrifying Sword Dao Origin Aura was released. The power of the Sword Dao was as vast as the sea of stars. Myriad Star Sword Realm. Break. With a single word, boundless sword light appeared out of nowhere. Then, it crushed all the attacks. Chapter 1596. Boom. The mighty power of the Sword Realm was released, and the stellar sword body was unleashed to the extreme. Tianyang's entire body seemed to have transformed into a star, flickering with starlight. At the same time, rays of incomparably bright light were released from Tianyang's body. The invisible air wave directly shattered the countless attacks at the same time. The disciples of the three major sects were all blasted away. "I'm a little disappointed." Tianyang chuckled, retracted the stellar sword body, and looked around. There were only two people who were not blasted away by the airwave: Lin Shan and Mu Ling. These two people were also the only two who did not make a move, because they knew that even if they did, it would not change much. "The two of you, do you want to go too?" Tianyang looked at Lin Shan and Mu Ling and asked. Although it was meaningless to kill too many people in an instant, he had already killed so many people. Killing two more was about the same. Hearing this, Mu Ling's face suddenly changed, and he instantly retreated a few hundred meters. Previously, so many people had joined forces to attack, but they were all blasted away by Tianyang, and some were even seriously injured. There were only two of them, and they still wanted to go, courting death. At the same time, Mu Ling was also extremely shocked. The last time he fought with Tianyang outside of Haomen, Tianyang was far from being this strong. In the few days in Haomen, and in the 2 months of the first round of the Genius Tournament. What happened? Lin Shan's face did not change, and he calmly retreated. Although the dozens of Saint Emperors were not as high quality as the disciples of the three major sects, they were not weak when they joined forces. They were not much worse than the disciples of the three major sections. However, they were still easily killed by Tianyang. This time, Tianyang did not use the Divine Soul technique that made the safety token useless. Damn it, Tianyang's Myriad Star Sword Realm was not considered to be his full strength, and these dozen of geniuses did not die immediately. Although many of them were blasted away by Tianyang, they were still lying on the ground, and they were still breathing. This guy from Haomen was actually hiding his strength. A disciple of the ancient Dao sect roared. Tianyang raised his brows when he heard this. "When did I reveal my strength in front of all of you?" "You." That disciple's eyes instantly turned crimson red when he heard this. He stared fixedly at Tianyang, and he was angered to the point of being unable to say a single word. At this time, the others finally noticed the situation on Tianyang's side. Practically everyone was certain that the people from Haomen would not be able to survive under the siege of the three major sects' disciples. In fact, it was hard to say if they could even survive the first attack of the chaotic battle. The result? Looking at the disciples of the three major sects who were lying on the ground in a radial formation around Tianyang, everyone couldn't help but gasp. This was simply too terrifying. One person had instantly killed more than a dozen peak holy emperors from the three great sects. Such strength was likely comparable to the top younger generation of the three great sects, namely Shang Qingzi, Tian Xuanzi, and the leader of the Zhongshuan devil sect. A little interesting, Feng Wuji looked at Tianyang, who was standing in the middle of a dozen fallen disciples, and the corners of his lips curled up. Earlier, he had only casually made a judgment based on the situation, with the trace of destiny power that came with his cultivation method. Although it was just a casual judgment, the success rate was not low. He didn't expect that the people from Haomen would really be able to break it. Then I'll do it. Feng Wuji smiled. Then he closed his eyes and a strange power of destiny flowed around his body. A mysterious and wondrous cultivation method flowed within it. However, Feng Wuji's eyes widened in the next moment. His eyes turned crimson red, and he felt a sweet taste in his throat. He almost spat out a mouthful of blood. The destiny power around him trembled violently. If Feng Wuji had not done his best to control it, it would have gone berserk. If the destiny power in his body went berserk, it would be almost impossible for him to continue controlling it with his current cultivation, which wasn't even at the god stage. What's going on with the people from Haomen? Feng Wuji roared as he looked at Tianyang in disbelief. He had been unable to divine many people over the years, but the number of people who had suffered such a backlash could be counted on one hand. The most recent time was when he tried to divine Shang Qingzi and suffered a backlash from his powerful divine bloodline. What's going on with the people from Haomen? Does he also have a divine bloodline? After circulating his cultivation method with all his might to suppress the destiny power that was about to go berserk, Feng Wuji took a deep breath and looked elsewhere. There was something wrong with Yang Tian. On the other hand, Shang Qingzi, who no one dared to challenge because of his reputation, also noticed Tianyang's situation. His handsome face immediately darkened. A clown will die sooner or later. There's no harm in dancing a little longer. Shang Qingzi muttered to himself and then fell silent. On the other side, the leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect smiled faintly. With such strength, you want to be on par with me. Ridiculous. At this moment, the dozen or so disciples of the three major sects who had been defeated by Tianyang also got up. The 1,000-star sword realm didn't cause much damage to them. You still want to fight? Seeing this, Tianyang raised his eyebrows and looked at the people who had been instantly defeated by him. Tianyang was rather impressed by the spirit of fighting despite repeated defeats. People from Haomen, don't think that you can be arrogant after defeating us. A disciple of the Zhongshuan demon sect gritted his teeth and roared at Tianyang. People on the battle stage, if you attack the people from Haomen, the Zhongshuan demon sect will reward you handsomely. Even if you don't enter the top 50 and don't receive the protection of the domain lord, you will still receive the protection of the Zhongshuan demon sect. The disciple of the Zhongshuan demon sect roared. Seeing this, Tianyang raised his eyebrows. Were all the people from the Zhongshuan demon sect the same? However, this sentence was indeed very useful. Those few words immediately stirred up the crowd. Some of the people who were avoiding the battle began to get restless. Just one sentence. Kill Yang Tian, and we will reward you handsomely. The disciple of the Zhongshuan demon sect roared, and in the next moment, many people charged forward. 10 or so people couldn't kill him. What if there were 20 or 30 of them? Immediately, a sinister smile appeared on the faces of the disciples of the three major sections. Seeing this, Tianyang raised his eyebrows and shrugged. Waves of intermediate Saint Emperor aura emanated from his body. Seeing this, everyone was stunned, and then their eyes lit up. Yang Tian was only a middle stage Saint King? Then, immediately, even more people rushed out. Is that all? Tianyang sighed and then smiled. Then, no need to trouble yourself. Call your leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect, Shang Qingzi and Tian Suzi. Come together. End of chapter. Chapter 1597. Call everyone you can. Come to me together. Tianyang chuckled. The pupils of the disciples of the ancient Tao sect, Sky Cloud Hall, and Zhongshuan devil sect instantly constricted when they heard this, and boundless rage surged in their eyes. Humiliating them might not be a big deal. After all, They were indeed inferior to Tianyang. But humiliating Sheng Qingzi, Tian Yuanzi, and the leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect in the Prodigy Tournament, this was no less than humiliating the three great sects. Although there was no difference to Tianyang whether he humiliated the three great sects or the three great sections. What a clumsy provocation. Sheng Qingzi smiled disdainfully. The strength that Tianyang had displayed was far from enough to make him attack. The leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect had an indifferent expression and did not speak. As for Tian Yuanzi, he was still calmly trying to calculate Tianyang's fate. The power of destiny had become extremely restless. No matter what Tianyang said, he did not want to respond. It was best not to provoke people who possessed divine veins or other treasures that could prevent the power of fate from peering into them. Arrogant. Someone snorted coldly and stepped forward. Seeing this person step forward, someone's expression changed slightly, and he revealed the person's origin in surprise. It's the famous unaffiliated cultivator in the western part of the Lingfeng territory, Ji Mingkai. He was unfortunately eliminated in the 51st place last time because of Haoman's human wave tactic. Is he here to take revenge? Although the Prodigy Tournament was said to be a tournament for the younger generation of the major forces, unaffiliated cultivators also had the qualifications to participate. There were even a large number of unaffiliated cultivators who participated in the Prodigy Tournament every year. However, it was undoubtedly extremely difficult for an unaffiliated cultivator to defeat a disciple of a major force who had many companions and an incomparably strong foundation. Therefore, unaffiliated cultivators had almost no achievements in the Prodigy Tournament. Last time, the best result was Ji Mingkai, who had stepped forward to berate Tianyang, obtaining the 51st place. He was known as the leader of the younger generation of unaffiliated cultivators and the 777th place on the True Dragon ranking. Previously, Haoman only managed to enter the top 50 of the Prodigy Grand Competition by relying on the advantage of numbers. Then, he was protected by the Lord of the territory and managed to survive in the Lingfeng realm. Now, Haoman finally has a powerful prodigy, but he's so arrogant that he even dares to provoke the leaders of the three major sects. Ji Mingkai sneered and looked at Tianyang. Rays of light flowed from his hand. Today I, Ji Mingkai, am not seeking revenge, nor am I seeking rewards. I'm only seeking to correct the proper attitude of a cultivator towards a strong. I am attacking you. In the next moment, Ji Mingkai's figure suddenly disappeared. It's the Netherworld Phantom Steps. This footwork is said to be an extremely profound footwork passed down by a godly realm almighty in Lingyun Peak. I didn't expect Ji Mingkai to have cultivated it, and even cultivated it to such a powerful level. Everyone's expression couldn't help but change when they saw Ji Mingkai suddenly vanish. They had lost track of Ji Mingkai's location through their senses. It seems like Ji Mingkai has been cultivating bitterly for 100 years this time, just to shine in the Prodigy Tournament. I'm afraid he's going to enter the top 30. Everyone exclaimed in admiration. An itinerant prodigy who had been defeated by a sect using a despicable tactic previously had returned with a vengeance. With that arrogant prodigy as the starting point, he had stepped onto the path of his rise. No matter how one looked at it, this was the beginning of a legendary story. Earthquaking 8 dragon fists. In just an instant, Ji Mingkai appeared in front of Tianyang. He had already gathered his strength in his right fist. His peak half-step demigod's true origin transformed into crimson flames. 8 giant dragon shadows roared at this moment. It was as if the entire earth was trembling. This was the killer move that Ji Mingkai had relied on to become famous. With this move, who knew how many prodigy disciples of the major forces had died? Ji Mingkai has even used this move. It seems like that Yang Tian is definitely going to die. Someone chuckled. Before Ji Mingkai had become a half-step demigod, he was already able to defeat some ordinary demigods. Now that Ji Mingkai had become a peak half-step demigod, the power of this punch would only be even more terrifying. However, Even though Ji Minkai's punch was extremely powerful, he didn't let his guard down. Previously, he did not know how Tianyang had defeated more than 10 disciples of the three major sects in an instant. He had not forgotten about that. He was certain that Tianyang was not weak. Now that he had used his strongest killer move, he could not let his guard down. In an instant, the moment Ji Minkai punched out, streams of powerful origin energy burst out. The origin realm opened. Seeing this, Tianyang raised his eyebrows and smiled faintly as he looked at Ji Minkai, who was charging towards him with a serious expression. Lingfeng Realm, the king of a younger generation of itinerant prodigies, rising to the top with a vengeance? Then, waves of pitch black, undying divine fire burned. The rolling, undying divine fire erupted. Indestructible burning sky seal. He punched out, a fist against a fist. Two extremely domineering flames collided. Then, the true yuan of a mid-stage holy emperor and a peak half-step demigod clashed. Boom, 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 boom. Cracks appeared on the entire fighting ring. Seeing this, the crowd's expression changed drastically. They did not expect that the people of Haomen would dare to fight Ji Minkai head-on. They also did not expect that the fight between the two of them would cause the extremely sturdy fighting ring to crack, as expected of the earth-shaking 8-dragon fist. Seeing this, someone exclaimed in admiration, "Ji Minkai is indeed Ji Minkai." The aftermath of this punch is actually able to cause the entire contest ring to crack. The people of Haomen will definitely lose now. That person praised. However, hearing this, the crowd's expression became a little strange. The current situation of the battle, it seems that revenge is not necessarily strong, Tianyang said with a chuckle. At this moment, he was clearly still in the midst of an intense fight, but he was still talking as if nothing had happened. On the other hand, Ji Minkai's veins were bulging, and his true yuan was burning wildly in order to unleash the earth-shaking 8-dragon fist with all his might. Oh no! Ji Minkai might not be able to defeat Yang Tian. At this moment, someone's expression changed drastically. He roared and then channeled his true yuan. Let's attack together and kill Yang Tian. In the next moment, a beam of light shot out from the person's hand. Hearing this, the people surrounding Tianyang seemed to have woken up from a dream. With a low roar, they channeled their true yuan and condensed it into attacks that charged toward Tianyang. The attack were twice as strong as before, and they ruthlessly charged toward Tianyang. Hearing this, Tianyang raised his eyebrows and then chuckled. Don't you know that it's very impolite to launch a sneak attack during a fight? In the next moment, the undying origin energy was channeled. A ferocious and terrifying blade of the immortal flame took the shape of a ring and spread in all directions. Then let me teach you how to behave. End of chapter. Chapter 1598. I'll teach you how to behave. As soon as he said that, the blade of undying divine flame that had formed a ring sped up. All the attacks landed on the ring of fire, but they had no effect at all. It was like a stone thrown into the sea, unable to cause any ripples. Instead, after being attacked, the ring of fire sped up even more. Stop! Seeing this, Ji Minkai's expression changed drastically, and he roared. He was the closest to Tianyang, and he was also the strongest among those who attacked. Therefore, he could feel how terrifying Tianyang's move was. Then his peak half-step demigod inner energy erupted and poured into the fist seal, which was hurled towards Tianyang. The ring of fire contained a terrifying power that even Ji Minkai's heart palpitated. If these cultivators were hit by it, the consequences would be unimaginable. I don't have time to play with you now. Sensing the sudden increase in pressure from the indestructible burning sky seal, Tianyang raised an eyebrow and waved his hand. The 5 origin powers were like flowing water, merging together smoothly and naturally. Then, he viciously sent Ji Minkai flying. Ji Minkai spat out a mouthful of blood as he was sent flying. His face was filled with disbelief. He thought that he had overestimated Tianyang. Although Tianyong seemed to have the upper hand in the previous battle, Ji Minkai was not at an absolute disadvantage. Why now? Tianyong could send him flying with a wave of his hand. He was still hiding his strength. Oh no! Ji Minkai's expression changed drastically as he looked at the dozens of cultivators who were standing in their original spots and attacking the ring of fire. Even he was sent flying so easily. How could these dozens of cultivators block it? However, as if sensing Ji Minkai's anxiety, the ring of fire sped up again. At this moment, those people were still standing in their original spots, unleashing one attack after another in an attempt to disperse the ring of fire before it could reach them. Seeing this, Ji Minkai's expression changed even more. Boom! After the third time, dozens of cultivators attacked together, but they were still unable to shake the ring of fire in the slightest. Some people finally realized that something was wrong. What was going on? However, even with that being the case, those people still had no intention of dodging. Instead, they sneered. This was the final battle of the Tianjiao Grand Tournament. Could it be that the people of Haomen dared to kill them all? However, while these people were thinking this, they did not see it. Tianyong's lips curled into a strange smile. Boom! The ring of flame suddenly emitted a dazzling light. In the blink of an eye, they turned into tens of thousands of flaming blades that shot out from all directions. Not good. Finally, someone's face changed, and his entire body's true essence erupted. Even the weakest of them was a peak Saint King. They immediately condensed a barrier of true energy in an attempt to block the sudden flaming blade. However, the smile on Tianyong's face became even more obvious. Boom! Puff! Puff! The sound of a sharp blade piercing into flesh could be heard. Following this, blood splattered out from the bodies of the cultivators. The most ruthless thing happened in the next moment. These flaming blades suddenly gathered together, forming a huge ring of flame. The cultivators who had already been hit were cut in half at the waist. Boom! Those who could escape had already done so. However, this scene remained in the deepest part of everyone's heart. Blood danced in the air, forming countless flowers of blood. These flowers of blood were separated from their owners, blooming gracefully. As for their master, he was the master. Their upper and lower bodies were separated, and they flew out. I've already said that if you attack recklessly, I'll teach you how to behave. Tianyong shrugged, sighed, and chuckled. Of course, I'll teach you how to behave. Bang! 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 Corpses fell to the ground one after another, and blood flowed out continuously. Originally, being cut in half at the waist was not a big deal for a peak Saint King cultivator. Those with strong enough vitality could live, well, even if they only had their heads left. However, Tianyong's immortal fire had the ability to kill all living things at the root. Moreover, Tianyong had also used a spiritual attack, just like the dozens of Saint Kings who had died in Burial Valley. These peak Saint Kings who had expended so much effort to enter the final round of the Tournament of Prodigies were all dead. What? You finally escaped, and now you want to start anew? Tianyong tilted his head, looked at the trembling crowd around him, and chuckled. Hearing this, those who had attacked Tianyong but were lucky enough to escape trembled both physically and mentally. Unexpectedly, all of them took out their tokens at the same time and crushed them almost at the same time. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Silver light flashed, and the 11 of them all crushed their safety tokens and left. Boring. Tianyong shrugged. He had spent a few seconds accumulating power for that move, and even played a few tricks in the middle. Tianyong was very disappointed that he did not kill all of them. Looks like those who can enter the final round of the Tournament of Prodigies are not simple people. Tianyong shook his head and sighed. However, when those words entered the ears of the crowd, it caused them to tremble with fear. There were more than 20 people who attacked Tianyong. Only 11 of them crushed their safety tokens and ran away, even if they ended up at the bottom. The rest were all dead. How could he say that those who participated in the Tournament of Prodigies were not simple people? Immediately, the crowd fell silent. When the realm master who had been watching the battle saw this, he raised his eyebrows, and the corners of his mouth curled up. However, his expression soon returned to normal. The only protection of the Tournament of Prodigies was the safety tokens. He was only there to watch the battle and then announce the final result. These people died without crushing their safety tokens. It was none of his business. Tianyang, on the other hand, acted as if nothing had happened and casually walked out. At the same time, his hands were not idle. He took the space bags of these people. Only now did he remember that he did not even have a single dollar from the divine realm. It was not easy to get to where he was now. However, when the crowd saw this scene, the corners of their mouths twitched. He had already killed them, and he even took their space bags. He simply did not treat them as humans. However, the effect of this action was very good. For a time, no one dared to attack Tianyang. Tianyang stood in the middle of endless blood, but no one dared to attack. After killing more than 10 people and forcing 11 to retreat, there were only about 50 people left in the field. Tianyang alone had more than doubled the time of this chaotic battle that had lasted for at least a day. 53rd. Shang Qingzi did not seem to pay attention to Tianyang. He was counting silently. At this time, a person flew out. 52nd. Soon after, another person was defeated. 51st. Shang Qingzi muttered to himself. Now, there was only one person left. This chaotic battle was over. Shang Qingzi's figure suddenly disappeared on the spot. In the next moment, the endless power of the divine vein appeared in front of Tianyang. Shang Qingzi had made his move. End of chapter. Chapter 1599. The power of the divine pulse was released crazily. Endless green filled the vision of the heavenly sun. Tianyang's expression changed when he saw the sudden and overwhelming power of the divine range. Even the undying source force in the surroundings was suppressed. The power of the supreme immortal realm had completely burst out from it. Withdrawing from the competition as the 51st place was the most despairing moment for the people of Haomen. Shang Qingzi hadn't made a move when the disciples of the ancient Dao sect, Sky Cloud Hall, and Sanchuan Demon sect besieged Tianyang. Shang Qingzi hadn't made a move when Tianyang had killed more than a dozen heaven prides. He had made a move at the last moment to force Tianyang off the stage. He had forced Haomen to stop at 51st place and be besieged by the three sects. He had been accumulating power for a long time, just for this moment. Shang Qingzi clenched his right fist as his azure hair fluttered in the wind. The light from his divine range seemed to penetrate his skin. Even with the naked eye, one could see the strange meridians flowing through his body. The supreme divine power bestowed by heaven and earth was flowing through them. The so-called divine range was when heaven and earth filled one's meridians with divine power when they were born. Once they were born, they would possess divine power and step into the God realm. At this moment, Shang Qingzi could erupt with true divine power as a demigod. A world of azure enveloped Tianyang. Boundless divine power erupted from his divine meridians. Under the influence of the divine power, the flow of time seemed to slow down. Next, Shang Qingzi punched out. Boom! A terrifying shockwave erupted from where Shang Qingzi's fist landed and rapidly spread in all directions. Many people were injured by the shockwave. They spat out mouthfuls of blood and were sent flying. Some people's pupils shrank as they looked in Tianyang's direction in disbelief. The strongest disciple of the ancient Dao sect and the strongest disciple of the younger generation of the three sects, Shang Qingzi, had made a move. The expression of the Zhongshuan devil sect leader instantly turned ugly, while Feng Wuji raised his head. What was the outcome of the collision between these two unfathomable people? A green light enveloped the entire martial arts arena. The power of the divine pulse had reached its peak. The expression of the realm master's emissary changed. The power of this punch was no weaker than that of God. A demigod punched out a deity realm punch. Perhaps this was the power of the divine range. His long azure hair fluttered in the wind as the divine veins in Shang Qingzi's body calmed down. The azure world around him also disappeared. Shang Qingzi's lips curled into a sneer. When he punched out, he could sense that Tianyang was not on guard at all. As a mid-stage holy emperor, he was completely defenseless against a punch comparable to a deity. The outcome was obvious. A stream of blood flew out, and Shang Qingzi was taken aback. There was blood only now. Soon after, Shang Qingzi discovered that his fist, which had been frozen in place, was being forcibly pushed away by an irresistible force. A cold light was released from his fist. Tianyang's entire body released the aura of a demigod, and a bloody wound was still bleeding on his face. The divine range is not bad. Then, the sky cloud sword appeared in Tianyang's hand, and he slashed out. Shang Qingzi's expression changed drastically. The divine force he'd withdrawn erupted once more, and he barely managed to block the attack. However, the fist that came towards him struck his face fiercely. Bang! Shang Qingzi's face caved in at a speed visible to the naked eye. He was sent flying by an unparalleled force. Streaks of immortal fire burned on Tianyang's face, but it did not immediately heal the wound. The divine range was still eroding Tianyang's face. Moreover, with the immortal fire's power, there was no way to quickly extinguish it. "You're lucky," Tianyang said indifferently. The white sky cloud, sword in his hand, turned into the pitch-black great void, sword embryo. A cold glint flashed across his eyes. A chill that seemed to come from the depths of hell was released. It was as if the entire world was going to be frozen. Tianyang reached out and touched the wound. Using the Sky Devourer's secret technique to raise his true yuan to peak demigod level, he assisted the immortal fire and destroyed the divine range's divine range. Everything returned to normal. However, his killing intent was still there. Tianyang had seen this divine range's divine range before. Before the sloppy old man died, there had been a flash of light from the depths of his bloodline. However, the light had been so weak that Tianyang had only noticed it, but not sensed it clearly. Now, it seemed that Shang Qingzi's divine range perfectly matched the light released from the depths of the sloppy old man's bloodline. The divine range was rooted in the bloodline. As long as the bloodline did not dissipate, it would be difficult to get rid of it. Therefore, Shang Qingzi had slaughtered the sloppy old man's entire clan and countless bloodlines for today's divine range. "You bastard!" Shang Qingzi was sent flying by Tianyang's punch. He managed to control his body in time and did not fall off the stage. However, Tianyang's punch had left him in an extremely sorry state. He roared furiously as if he did not see Tianyang's killing intent. At this moment, Tianyang's figure flashed, and the 9th transformation of the heavens expanse, 9 transformations erupted. In an instant, he was in front of Shang Qingzi. "Die," Tianyang said indifferently. It was only a single word. However, it carried endless killing intent and pressure. He raised the great void, sword embryo in his hand, and slashed down rapidly. "Kill me? With just you?" Hearing this, Shang Qingzi laughed wildly as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. In the next moment, he was about to attack. However, Shang Qingzi suddenly discovered that he couldn't even move a single finger. It was as if the space-time he was in had been sealed. As for Heavenly Sun's sword, it descended rapidly. "Stop!" At this moment, a soft shout rang out. Tianyang did not seem to have heard it. The great void sword embryo's downward slash was even more violent. The top 50 have been decided. Now, the first round of the Heaven's Pride tournament is over. The Realm Master's voice rang out. In the next moment, a godly realm power burst out. Tianyang's expression changed slightly. He had to take a step back to avoid being hit by this godly realm attack, although it was just a casual attack that was released in an instant. However, it gave Tianyang a feeling. It was much stronger than Deng Zhongquan's clone under the vast firmament Divine Mountain. Shang Qingzi also took this opportunity to quickly leave Tianyang's attack range. His eyes were filled with shock and anger. The first round has ended. The Realm Master's black robe did not move at all. A faint voice was heard. "If you want to continue, in an hour, the second round of the Heaven's Pride tournament will begin." End of this chapter. Chapter 1600. Tianyang's sword was easily neutralized by the Realm Master's envoy. Tianyang's expression changed slightly as he looked at Shang Qingzi, who had already flown to a corner of the battle stage. Then, a beam of white light entered his body from the Great Void Sword embryo, and the sky-devouring secret technique disappeared. His aura also returned to the intermediate Saint Emperor realm. Tianyang calmly put away the Great Void Sword embryo as he watched the Realm Master's envoy leave after blocking his attack. If the Celestial Realm went all out, it would be enough to block the Realm Lord's emissary and kill Shang Qingzi. However, there would be plenty of opportunities to kill Shang Qingzi. There was no need to offend a Realm Master's envoy. The first round of the Heaven's Pride tournament is over. The Realm Master's envoy spoke again in a calm tone. Everyone on the battle stage is to leave. Then, the Realm Master flicked his finger and streams of spatial force acted on the remaining 50 Heaven's Prides. At the same time, the 30 or so geniuses and corpses who had crushed their life-saving tokens or were defeated and blasted off the battle stage were also sent out. The top 50 had been decided. In other words, everyone who was still standing on the battle stage, except for the unaffiliated cultivators, would receive the protection of the Realm Master. Haoman, even if he was defeated in the next second, would also receive the protection of the Realm Master. Seeing this, the disciples of the Zhongshuan Demon Sect, Sky Cloud Hall, and Ancient Dao Sect all had ugly expressions. It could be said that Haoman had already won half of the Heaven's Pride tournament. It seems that the Realm Master's protection will only lose its effect if this person dies. The leader of the Zhongshuan Demon Sect said coldly. The Heaven's Pride tournament was to select the geniuses of the major forces and strengthen the martial way of the Lingfeng realm. If this Heaven's Pride died, it would naturally be impossible to strengthen the martial way of the Lingfeng realm. The protection of the force behind this person might also be gone. A vicious look flashed across Shang Qingzi's eyes. It was obvious that he also had the same idea. The Realm Master of the Lingfeng realm was equivalent to the king of the Lingfeng realm. The Realm Master's strength far surpassed any sect master, ancestor, or supreme elder of the Lingfeng realm. The protection of the Realm Master was like a golden token to avoid death within Lingfeng. The change in the atmosphere between the leaders of the three great sects was not only understood by them, but also by the others. However, Tianyang's expression was indifferent as he stood there without moving. The Great Void Sword embryo in his hand flickered, emitting rays of sharp light from time to time. Similarly, rays of sharp light flashed in his eyes. Next, it was a battle to the death. I wonder if I'll be able to reach late Saint King, or even peak Saint King after this battle. The corners of Tianyang's mouth curled upwards as he chuckled. It was not easy for him to make a breakthrough in his cultivation. It was basically impossible for him to reach the peak of Saint King in a single battle. It meant Tianyang had set his sights on Saint Qingzi's divine vein. A few hours passed in the blink of an eye for these cultivators. Let the second round of the Heavenly Pride tournament begin. The Realm Lord's emissary also let out a low shout, waking up countless people who were in the midst of cultivation. The crowd's faces were filled with battle intent. The protection of the top 50 Realm Lords was only a part of the rewards of the Heavenly Pride tournament. The top 30, top 20, top 10, and even top 5 all had powerful opportunities from the Realm Lords. These opportunities were extremely powerful. In the past, many demigods had even refined and absorbed the rewards of the Heavenly Pride tournament on the spot and broke through to the Divine Realm on the spot. To be able to cultivate the top 50 geniuses of the Lingfeng realm, they naturally would not lack security, nor would they participate in the battle for the protection of a Realm Lord. They were doing it for the opportunity to break through to the Divine Realm. Even if they did not succeed, their cultivation would be greatly enhanced, and the difficulty of breaking through to the Divine Realm in the future would be greatly reduced. Instantly, almost everyone's faces were filled with battle intent. The rules of the second round are slightly different from the previous ones. However, the Realm Lord's emissary did not immediately start the second round of the Heavenly Pride tournament. Instead, he spoke slowly. The previous rounds of battles were too cumbersome and a waste of time. Therefore, the Realm Lord has changed the rules of the second round this time. The Realm Lord's emissary said indifferently, from drawing lots to choosing opponents, the competition will officially begin after the 50 people have been matched. Hearing this, everyone was taken aback. Choosing opponents. Immediately, the expressions of some of the weaker people changed slightly, and they tried their best to hide their cultivation aura, while the stronger ones sneered. Wisps of primordial spirit sensing power were released from their spirit seas. What kind of opponent was this? In other words, it was to let them choose a soft persimmon. Immediately, countless experts rushed toward a few people. This scene also fell into the eyes of the Realm Lord's emissary. His expression did not change, but there was a trace of a mocking light in his eyes. Picking soft persimmons would only allow them to enter the top 25. The top 25 would only allow them to obtain the rewards for the top 30. It would be extremely difficult to increase the success rate of entering the divine realm. Most importantly, in the first round, they were all picking the weak as their opponents. In the later rounds, they were all experts. What could these people use to advance further? The Realm Lord's emissary swept his gaze around. As expected, Shang Qingzi, the leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect, Feng Wuji, Tianyang, and Ji Minkai were all motionless. However, in the next moment, the leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect disappeared in a flash. At the same time, an extremely fierce gust of wind shot toward Tianyang. Tianyang's expression did not change. With a flick of his wrist, a powerful gust of wind neutralized the attack. And that thing also fell into Tianyang's line of sight. A protection token. Seeing this, Tianyang raised his brows. In the next moment, the leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect appeared in front of Tianyang. He casually grabbed the protection token that was about to fall to the ground and casually threw it outside. What do you think? The leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect said with a sinister smile. Hearing this, Tianyang raised his brows. What do you mean? Throw away the protection token and then fight with me. A black light flashed in the Zhongshuan demon sect leader's eyes as a demigod aura was released from his body. The surrounding black inner yuan, which was far more powerful than Lin Shan's, seemed to form a twisted substance that flickered with a strange light under the sunlight. It was as if his entire body was covered by this black inner yuan. Then, a low and sinister voice sounded. A battle of life and death. In a chapter 1601, a battle of life and death. The leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect chuckled. His voice was strangely attractive. Unlike those who cultivated illusions, the leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect's voice was not enticing. Instead, there was an impulse. It gave people the urge to submit to him. Coupled with Tian Xuanzi's power of destiny and Shang Qingzi's divine pulse, Tianyang's heart trembled. None of the three great sects were simple. However, do you think a nameless person is worthy? Tianyang chuckled. Astonishment surfaced on the Zhongshuan demon sect leader's face when he heard this, before his expression turned extremely strange. My name. If you could survive in my hands, you will know. The leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect instantly disappeared. Then, the streams of black origin energy turned into sharp blades and slashed at Tianyang. Tianyang raised his right hand, and the sharp blades slashed at Tianyang's right arm, causing sparks to fly. Tianyang did not seem surprised that the leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect had attacked before the second round of the battle had even begun. Without any time to react, his right fist turned into a palm and grabbed the leader's origin energy. Then, he punched out with his left fist. Streams of true flames of destruction shot out like cannonballs. Interesting. Not bad. The leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect curled his lips into a smile. At this moment, the black origin energy that enveloped the Zhongshuan demon sect leader's body completely turned solid at this moment. It turned into countless sharp spikes that pierced towards Tianyang. At the same time, the demigod-level origin energy was released. He opened his mouth and spat out a sharp blade burning with strange purple flames. Tianyang's true annihilation flames were immediately suppressed and a sharp blade that carried a strange, indescribable poison was only an inch away from Tianyang in an instant. However, Tianyang's face was abruptly set ablaze with undying divine fire. The sharp blade was incinerated. At the same time, a burst of true essence erupted from his body. The spikes were instantly blasted apart. However, Tianyang only realized at this moment. The leader of the Tsangshuan devil sect, who had been fighting head-on earlier, suddenly disappeared. Ha! Interesting. The leader of the Tsangshuan demon sect laughed maniacally as streams of black origin energy condensed into an enormous black spear. It pierced through space and shot toward Tianyang. At the same time, the Tsangshuan demon sect leader's figure disappeared once again. The next time he appeared, he was accompanied by a sky full of black origin energy as he viciously blasted towards Tianyang. Spear behind, fist in front. At the same time, the spear on Tianyang's back released a suction force. Although it did not imprison Tianyang, it greatly restricted Tianyang's movements. The leader of the Tsangshuan devil sect had evidently thought of Tianyang's speed when he attacked. If this punch missed, it would be a joke. Tianyang also sensed the suction force behind him, but reacted in an instant. He completely ignored the enormous spear behind him, and the great void sword embryo appeared in his hand. At the same time, the heavenly sword was attached to the great void sword embryo. A distorted and intertwined silver light lit up from the 10 great origins in his body. Space-time instant. In an instant, the surrounding space-time was frozen by the powerful space-time origins. Wah! A trace of shock appeared on the Tsangshuan demon sect leader's face. Before he could utter another word, he was frozen by Tianyang. At the same time, Tianyang changed his origins. The primal chaos origin, the boundless origin, and the sword Tao origin bloomed. The fusion of the 3 origins. A beam of dazzling sword light viciously slashed down. Damn it! The Tsangshuan demon sect leader also broke free from the space-time stagnation caused by the space-time origins. His face finally turned ugly when he saw the sword light that had already slashed down. He did not think that this was Tianyang's space-time origins. After all, Tianyang's 1,000-star sword world had already shown that he possessed the sword Tao origin. One person having 2 origins was unheard of in the divine world. He only thought that Tianyang had some powerful treasure. Therefore, a beam of light appeared on the Tsangshuan demon sect leader's fist. With this beam of light, it bombarded Tianyang's 3 origins sword light. Boom! That guy actually used the demon-destroying light? Feng Wuji, who was fighting with an ordinary person, raised his eyebrows and looked at the battle between Tianyang and the Tsangshuan demon sect leader. The person fighting with Feng Wuji was only a half-step demigod. Normally, Feng Wuji would kill him in one move. However, in order to watch the battle between Tianyang and the Tsangshuan demon sect leader, Feng Wuji was not serious at all. At this moment, he was looking at the beam of light that appeared in the Tsangshuan demon sect leader's hand with incomparable surprise. The demon-destroying light. It was a one-time use treasure unique to the Tsangshuan demon sect. As long as it was a half-step divine weapon, it could instantly shatter it. Even if it was a half-step divine weapon or above, it could instantly seal the opponent's ability. It could be said that it was the natural enemy of treasures. However, this demon-destroying light bombarded Tianyang's sword light. It had no effect at all. Instead, it was easily crushed by the sword light. Then, it bombarded the Tsangshuan demon sect leader's body. TCH, the Tsangshuan demon sect leader was sent flying, but he did not suffer any injuries. After all, the Tsangshuan demon sect leader was a half-step demigod. It was obviously impossible to defeat him so easily. Even if it was Ji Mingkai, Tianyang would not be able to kill him with a single punch if he did not activate the heaven-devouring secret technique and enter the pinnacle demigod realm. At this moment, the immortal divine flames burned behind Tianyang. They turned into a long dragon and charged towards the spear behind him. Then, the huge pillar of fire formed by the true destructive flames also shot out. The immortal divine flames and the true destructive flames collided. What followed was a series of extremely terrifying explosions. The power of the explosion easily stopped the Black Spear's forward momentum. Tianyang also freed up his hands and chased after the Zhongshuan demon sect leader. What kind of trick is this? Seeing this, the Zhongshuan demon sect leader pulled the corners of his mouth and punched out. Three Tribulations Fist. The Zhongshuan demon sect leader roared. Rays of light bloomed from his fist and fiercely collided with Tianyang's indestructible burning sky seal. First Tribulation of the Red Dust Kill. In an instant, it was as if thousands of blood flowers had formed around them and surrounded Tianyang. Second Tribulation, World Cleansing Break. The Zhongshuan demon sect leader punched out again almost at the same moment the first punch was thrown out. This punch was even more terrifying than the previous one. The two punches overlapped and directly shattered Tianyang's indestructible burning sky seal. Then, they blasted towards Tianyang with their remaining power. 3 Tribulations. The Zhongshuan demon sect leader's inner yuan erupted. However, after erupting, it poured into the Zhongshuan demon sect's leader's body. In an instant, the Zhongshuan demon sect leader's entire body was covered in black, and his eyes were completely white. His entire body exuded a strange demonic aura. Tianyang, after using a large amount of origin power to shatter the previous punch, clearly saw the Zhongshuan demon sect leader's current state. His expression changed. The Zhongshuan demon sect leader's low and evil voice sounded. Black clouds and mist swirled around. Immortal demon transformation. In a chapter. Chapter 1602. 3 Tribulations. Immortal demon transformation. A low and evil voice came from the ethereal true origin immortal mist. Then, the immortal mist dissipated. Tianyang soon saw the leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect, who was hidden within. The Zhongshuan demon sect leader's black robe had long disappeared and was replaced by a pitch-black color that covered his entire body. The black true yuan seemed to have completely replaced the Zhongshuan demon sect leader's body. The black true yuan had completely solidified and attached itself to the leader's body. It was to the extent that even his height had increased by a foot. It had turned into an incomparably sinister, black, demonic body. However, on his face, the originally rigid lines suddenly became gentle. In his eyes, the pupils disappeared and were replaced by a pair of white eyes that were filled with a strange, immortal feeling. His head had become incomparably handsome and immortal, but there was darkness below his head, as if countless thorns had grown out of his body. This was the Zhongshuan demon sect's strongest fist technique, the third tribulation of the 3 Tribulations Fist, the immortal demon transformation. The so-called 3 Tribulations Fist didn't mean that it would bring about any calamities or erupt with terrifying strength. Instead, it meant using one's terrifying strength to bring endless calamities to the opponent. I haven't used the immortal demon transformation in a long time. The Zhongshuan demon sect leader's deep voice sounded, although his head belonged to the immortal part of the immortal demon transformation. His voice was still abnormally demonic. When I used it back then, I almost killed a demigod. The Zhongshuan demon sect leader slowly spoke. In the next instant, his figure suddenly disappeared. A smear of blood slowly dissipated in the air. I wonder if I can kill you now. The Zhongshuan demon sect leader's voice seemed to come from all directions. The entire place was filled with his wild roar. Sheng Qingzi and Feng Wuji also stopped and looked in Tianyang's direction in shock. It was one thing to use the light of devil destruction. Although this treasure was precious, the Zhongshuan demon sect had a lot of it. With the Zhongshuan demon sect leader's status, he could use as much as he wanted. But the immortal demon transformation of the 3 Tribulations Fist was the Zhongshuan demon sect leader's strongest killing move. It was only 25 out of 50. Was there a need to go this far? While the crowd was still in shock, the leader of the Zhongshuan devil sect finally revealed the sinister fangs of the immortal demon transformation. Without any trace, he appeared in front of Tianyang. Similarly, there was no trace of him. Countless black spikes shot out from the leader of the Zhongshuan devil sect. Surging black vital energy was released. In an instant, it turned the surrounding 100 feet into a world of black vital energy. Zhongshuan Demon Sect, land of mystical demons. Domain suppression, frontal attacks, and a 360-degree ambush with no blind spots. All of them landed on Tianyang at the same time. Boom! Even this time, Tianyang couldn't react in time. Countless streams of black, true essence collided with each other, erupting with an even more terrifying explosion. This was clearly not the destruction source, but it still possessed a terrifying destructive power comparable to the destruction source. With a perfect combination of strength, speed, and agility, he could be said to be invincible among the peak demigods. This was the strongest fist technique of the Zhongshuan Devil Sect's leader, the Three Calamity Fist. Not bad. The leader of the Zhongshuan Devil Sect quickly wiped away the smoke that was obstructing his vision. Looking at the empty sky, a satisfied smile immediately appeared on his face. After using the immortal demon transformation, he crushed this man from the house sect as easily as crushing dry weeds. Although it was still uncertain whether Haoman would lose the protection of the Domain Lord, he still didn't reveal too much of his trump card. Unfortunately, you were so close to knowing my name. The leader of the Zhongshuan Devil Sect shook his head and smiled. He didn't think that Tianyang had any chance of surviving this attack. Unfortunately, Tianyang had forced Shang Qingzi to retreat with a single punch, so he thought that he still had a chance to fight. But now, it seemed that there weren't many people who could withstand his Three Calamity immortal demon transformation. Subsequently, the leader of the Zhongshuan Devil Sect planned to dispel the immortal demon transformation. After all, it was very difficult to maintain the immortal demon head and demon body when the two almost completely different forces collided. However, in the next moment, the leader of the Zhongshuan Devil Sect's expression changed drastically as a sense of danger rose in his heart. The inner yuan that was just about to dissipate condensed again, and in the next moment, a punch was thrown out. Boom! Even space was annihilated quite a bit. Shattered space ripples spread out in just an instant. The space of the entire arena was filled with cracks. This was the strongest power of the Three Calamity immortal demon transformation. However, even so, the attack that made the leader of the Zhongshuan Devil Sect's expression change didn't disappear. Instead, it descended in front of the leader of the Zhongshuan Devil Sect in an even more ferocious manner. It was a ray of sword light. Boom! This ray of sword light directly bombarded the body of the Zhongshuan Devil Sect's leader. In just an instant, the terrifying body transformed from the Three Calamity immortal demon transformation was blasted into pieces. Countless materialized black vital essence shattered at this moment and shot out in all directions. Seeing this, the expressions of the other people who still had the strength to watch the battle changed drastically. "Who is it?" Shang Qingzi exclaimed in shock. "Who could directly shatter the full power of the Three Calamity immortal demon transformation and even shatter the body of the Zhongshuan Devil Sect's leader?" Immediately, someone raised his head and looked at the Territory Master's envoy. Someone had suddenly appeared and defeated the leader of the Zhongshuan Devil Sect. Why hadn't the Territory Master made a move yet? Haoman, the leader of the Zhongshuan Demon Sect, spat out a large mouthful of blood with a cry. Then his eyes widened in anger as he glared at Tianyang. "I didn't expect you to still be alive." Others couldn't sense it, but the leader of the Zhongshuan Devil Sect could clearly sense it. This sword light was exactly the same as the previous one. However, its power was much stronger than before. It was unknown how much stronger it was. He was more than alive. From this attack alone, Tianyang didn't seem to have suffered any injuries. What? Everyone's expression changed. Haoman's man. The man from Haoman who was lucky enough to enter the top 50, but was unfortunately targeted by the leader of the Zhongshuan Devil Sect? How could he still survive after taking the full power attack of the Three Calamity immortal demon transformation? At this moment, the smoke completely dissipated. Tianyang's body was wrapped in peak demigod inner yuan as he stepped into the air. Damn it! Seeing this, the leader of the Zhongshuan devil sect's face darkened. He snorted and gathered his inner yuan. His demonic body was once again repaired. With a loud roar, he charged toward Tianyang. At this moment, Tianyang glanced around. Is the battle almost over? Then, Tianyang pursed his lips and waved his hand. 10 balls of light appeared. Sorry, I'm in a hurry. The heaven realm erupted. A pillar of light that connected heaven and earth and tore apart the universe fell from the sky. Boom! It engulfed the leader of the Zhongshuan devil sect. End of chapter. Chapter 1603. Boom! 10 layers of origin power instantly condensed. At this moment, they converged into a terrifying pillar of light that descended from the sky like the wrath of a god. It ruthlessly struck the leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect. In just a moment, the leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect, who had just erupted with an incomparably ferocious roar, no longer made sound. The heaven domain was ultimately still the heaven domain. Although Tianyang had only activated a little and did not use his full strength like he did against Deng Zhongquan. But the current Tianyang was not the same as the Tianyang back then. Similarly, the current heaven realm and the heaven realm at that time were not the same level of perfection. As a result, the leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect might not be much weaker than Deng Zhongquan's clone, but he was still crushed by a portion of the heaven domain. Boom! That pillar of light continued to descend from the sky, as if it had really formed a pillar, in contrast to the pillar of light of the heaven domain. Everyone, whether it was the battle that had ended long ago or was in the midst of a fierce battle, everyone stopped moving at this moment. Their mouths were wide open as they stared blankly at the pillar of light that supported the sky. Shang Qingzi's expression froze in an instant. What level of attack was this? Was this an attack that an intermediate Saint Emperor could unleash? Heaven's Oracle Feng Wuji lowered his head, not daring to continue looking at the terrifying pillar of light. He was afraid that Tianyang had already known that he had secretly used the power of destiny of that strange cultivation technique to plot against him. For an expert, it was not easy to accept being plotted against. This is impossible. This was the first time the envoy of the Heaven Domain Master had spoken outside of the Heaven Pride tournament. Perhaps because of shock, his voice was hoarse at this moment. A person can only cultivate one origin power. At the beginning of the God Realm, there is only one law. Impossible, absolutely impossible. This must be some terrifying treasure. As if he had found a life-saving straw, the envoy of the Heaven Domain Master repeated in a low voice. A person cultivating one origin power was the God Realm and the martial principle of all the worlds in the universe. No one had ever cultivated more than one origin power, so no one had even tried. However, from the point of view of the Realm Master Emissary, the eruption of the Heaven Realm this time, at the very least, there were no less than 4 strands of origin energy. Other than the fact that it was a divine artifact, and a divine artifact at that, there was no other explanation. Could this be the legacy left behind by the Howman Heaven's Expanse Monarch? If that was the case, then everything would be easy to deal with. Tianyang did not know that the exposure of the 10 great origins that he was worried about had already been found by the emissary of the Realm Lord. At this moment, he was still surprised by the strength of the Heaven Realm. I see, Tianyang muttered to himself as he looked at the gigantic light pillar that far exceeded his expectations. Of the 10 great origins, the strength of one origin will lead the entire Heaven Realm to become countless times stronger. Among the 10 great origins of the Heaven Realm, the strongest was undoubtedly the Primal Chaos origin. Unfortunately, the Primal Chaos origin happened to be the most difficult to strengthen. Tianyang had relied on fate along the way, except for when he had the confidence to condense it. However, the Heaven's Expanse origin had been strengthened a lot in the vast Divine Mountain, in the Burial Valley, because he had obtained a drop of Emperor inheritance blood from the Kangwu monarch. His immortal origin had also advanced by leaps and bounds. Compared to the skyrocketing growth of the vast divine mountain, it was not the slightest bit weaker. Although this drop of Emperor Inheritance blood was still in Tianyang's spirit sea, Tianyang might not have absorbed even 1% of its energy. However, 1% of the Emperor Inheritance blood was enough to strengthen the immortal origin to an extreme level. Therefore, it led to the current terror of the Heaven Realm. That guy, don't tell me he's dead. Tianyang looked down at the leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect, who had not released any aura until now, and frowned slightly. With a snap of his fingers, the terrifying heavenly pillar, which was as terrifying as the wrath of a god, disappeared. The leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect had collapsed below. The immortal head and demon body brought about by the third tribulation, transcendent demon transformation, had long disappeared. It should have been shattered by the Heaven Realm. However, looking at his posture, Tianyang really suspected that he was dead. His face was facing the ground, and his left arm still seemed to be in a punching posture, facing forward. His right arm hung weakly behind him, leaning against his leg. It seemed that he had stopped. If he's dead, it will be difficult. Tianyang frowned. He did not care whether the leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect was dead or alive, but if the leader's death led to an unexpected change in his plan of Haomen's counterattack, it would be very difficult for him. Cough cough, PFFF. The leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect's body trembled, and then he spat out a mouthful of blood. Then his eyes were blood red, and he stood up. However, although he stood up, he was swaying as if at any moment, bang, he fell down again. The third tribulation, transcendent demon transformation, had been completely broken, and coupled with the baptism of the terrifying light pillar of the Heaven Realm, it was impossible for the leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect to stand up and fight Tianyang again. It's good that you're still alive. Tianyang raised his eyebrows and sighed at the leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect's tenacious vitality. He stood on the ground. He was only a few meters away from the leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect, and he could attack Tianyang at any time. However, the immortal divine fire that flickered around Tianyang's body and the peak demigod chi that was constantly emitting from his body made the leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect not even think of using a treasure artifact. Who won? Tianyang looked at the territory master envoy and asked. Haomen Yang Tian won. Hearing this, the realm lord emissary nodded. Now that the leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect was in such a state, even if he continued to fight, he would only be killed. The territory master envoy had nothing to do with the Zhongshuan demon sect, and he would be crazy to help him. Hearing this, although the truth had already been confirmed, when it was actually announced, some people still felt dizzy. Haomen, who was suppressed by the three great forces and could only rely on the protection of the territory master to survive, not only entered the top 50, but also defeated the leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect in a head-on battle. The strongest expert of the younger generation of the Lingfeng realm, on the same level as Tian Xuanzi and Sheng Qingzi. Some people who had looked down on Haomen wanted to believe that everything was a fluke and that Haomen was only SOSO. However, the leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect had displayed the three tribulation fists, and in addition to the final burst of power, it was not an exaggeration to say that he had exceeded his standard. How could it be a fluke? The territory master envoy also glanced at Tianyang when he made the announcement, trying to find something unusual. However, there was no result. He could only sigh at the power of the heaven expanse Emperor's inheritance. The leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect spoke. Remember, my name is Li Xuanzang, the person who will defeat you in the future. With that, he left without looking back. The top 30 to 26 people did not participate. There was indeed nothing for the leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect to participate. End of chapter. Chapter 1604. The leader of the Zhongshuan demon sect, Li Xuanzang. Tianyang looked at Li Xuanzang's departing figure with interest. He only withdrew his gaze after Li Xuanzang opened a space door and left. This was the first time Tianyang felt that it would be difficult to defeat this guy without using the heaven-devouring secret technique. There weren't many people like him after Tianyang came to the divine world. Although Tianyang's cultivation wasn't any different from when he first came out of Vast Sky, Sacred Mountain, he was much stronger in other aspects. Disregarding everything else, just the aspect of the immortal divine body alone made Heavenly Sun much stronger. Moreover, Tianyang had been persistently cultivating the stellar sword body and other cultivation techniques. Although the increase in each of these wasn't obvious, Tianyang's strength had increased greatly when added together. It wasn't difficult to defeat a peak demigod with his own strength. Li Xuanzang made Tianyang feel that he had to use the heaven-devouring secret technique to defeat him, which showed how extraordinary he was. Although it would be an instant kill if he used the heaven-devouring secret technique. I didn't expect Li Xuanzang to be the first to leave. Ji Mingkai's face darkened when he saw this scene. Haomen's strength had far exceeded his expectations. Even Li Xuanzang of the Zhangxuan demon sect couldn't defeat him. On the contrary, he was easily injured by this person from Haomen. It was already extremely difficult for him to get into the top 3. Tian Suzi, Shang Qingzi, and Li Xuanzang weren't easy to deal with. He was much weaker than them. Now, Li Xuanzang was gone. But there was another person who was more terrifying than Li Xuanzang and even stronger than the 3 Lingfeng Rel prodigies, Haomen Yang Tian. That wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was, he had offended this person before. Ji Mingkai's face instantly turned extremely ugly. However, there was another person who didn't look any better. It was Shang Qingzi. Damn it, why is this guy so strong? Seeing Heavenly Sun withdraw his true essence and close his eyes to rest, Saint Qingzi couldn't help but grit his teeth and glare at him. Back then, he had been blown away by Tianyang's punch and had relied on the Realm Master's envoy to not be beaten down by Tianyang. Shang Qingzi felt that it was a great humiliation. However, because they hadn't fought before, he didn't think that Tianyang was stronger than him. However, Tianyang's performance made Shang Qingzi's face's expression changed. It was possible. Tianyang was stronger than him. I have the divine veins, and I am the child of heaven. In the future, even the ancient Tao sect will not be my stage. I am destined to become the supreme being of the immortal realm. So how could I lose to an insignificant ant? Roared, rose, shouted, was, yes. Li Xuanzang was not much weaker than him. He, Shang Qingzi, was invincible. However, Tianyang didn't notice Shang Qingzi's change. In fact, Tianyang didn't even bother to notice it. He was communicating with Ling Yuhan in his heart. What's Li Xuanzang's rank on the True Dragon ranking? Tianyang asked. Li Xuanzang was able to force him to use the heaven-devouring secret technique, which meant that he was very strong. He wondered what rank he would be on the 100 Realms True Dragon ranking. Immortal Demon Li Xuanzang, 327th on the True Dragon ranking. Ling Yuhan replied quickly. As for the demonized, vast expanse Holy Spirit, who was supposed to be in charge of this, he had already run away. He had already run off to the side to do who knows what. Allowing this fellow to help Tianyang was undoubtedly the worst decision the Heaven's Expanse Saint Spirit had ever made. Only 300th? Tianyang was a little surprised to hear this. Li Xuanzang's strength was already extraordinary. With the 3rd Tribulation Immortal Demon Transformation, he didn't even need to burn his inner Yuan to fight against a god. He was only 300th on the True Dragon ranking. What kind of monsters were those in the top 100, top 50, and top 10? Cultivating Qi when he was 1, slaying dragons when he was 3, and now he was 280 years old and could even kill a giant god? The corner of Tianyang's mouth twitched. He had already expected this. He had expected this, but when he realized it, he finally understood. The God World was indeed the God World. Although Tianyang had already seen 2 realms in the Divine Realm, the Cloudfire Realm and the Lingfeng Realm were nothing compared to the other realms. There were those who surpassed the Lingfeng Realm in the 100 Realms True Dragon ranking. It's okay. Master is only Middle Saint King now. If Master becomes a half-god, he can definitely beat the entire True Dragon ranking. Ling Yuhan waved her fist and said, the True Dragon ranking wasn't limited by cultivation, but age. Tianyang was around 50 years old now. If he was 10 times older, he could still be listed on the True Dragon ranking. However, would it take Tianyang so long to break through to the God Realm? From the looks of it, the first on the True Dragon leaderboard was only a demigod. It's okay, I just mentioned it casually, Tianyang said with a smile. Tianyang really didn't care about the True Dragon ranking. After a few minutes, the second round of battles came to an end. Other than Li Xuanzong, no one else who was recognized as the strongest left. Fang Wuji and Sheng Qingzi had already defeated their opponents, but they didn't make the final attack because they wanted to watch the battle. Now that the battle between Haomenyang Tian and Sanchuan Demon Sex Li Xuanzong had ended, there wasn't much time left for the rest of the battles. The top 25 will receive a half-divine artifact of any choice. The Realm Lord's emissary growled, and then hundreds of semi-divine artifacts burst out from his space ring. In the heavenly firmament great world, the only spatial treasure was a spatial bag. But in the realm of the gods, everything was available. Instantly, swords, spears, sabers, staffs, hammers, axes, halberds, spears, armor, shields, heart-protecting mirrors, countless half-divine artifacts appeared in front of the Realm Master Envoy. Seeing this, everyone's expression changed slightly. Powerful auras were unleashed from the half-martial weapons. If you come in the next round, you will receive one of these half-divine artifacts. However, if you fail, you will be the last to choose, even if it is a half-divine artifact. If you give up now, you can choose first and leave, the Realm Master Envoy said. Hearing this, many people's hearts jumped. Among these half-divine artifacts, there was no lack of quality, but there was also no lack of trash. The strongest aura was even close to that of a divine artifact. It was a little cheap to call them half-divine artifacts. However, the trashiest ones were even broken and had no aura at all. Obviously, they were prepared for the losers. If they left, they could take a half-divine artifact that was close to a divine artifact. Suddenly, many people were excited, but no one said that they would give up. The top 30 treasures were already so good. Then, what about the top 10, top 3, and first place? Then, if no one gives up, we will proceed to the next round, the Realm Master Envoy said, and took back the hundreds of half-divine artifacts. Tianyang locked onto one of the broken black swords in an instant until it was taken back by the Realm Master Envoy. There was a burning look in his eyes. The great void sword embryo in his hand also let out a crisp sword sound. That was a fragment of the great void sword embryo. End of chapter. Chapter 1605. A fragment of the great void sword embryo. Although the divine realm was the most likely place to find a fragment of the great void sword embryo, Tianyang was still shocked when he saw it in front of him. The great void sword embryo was extremely mysterious. Back then, it was just a sword embryo given to him by the great void emperor of the Tianshao Great World to replace the other swords that Tianyang could no longer use. Tianyang thought it was a good sword that the great void emperor got from a nearby macro world, so he kept it. He didn't expect that he would use it for decades. However, no matter how much Tianyang's strength had increased, the great void sword embryo could still withstand it easily. It was the same for the Sea Spirit Realm, the Heaven-Reaching Realm, Wuzun Realm, the Saint Realm, the Supreme Saint, and even the current Holy Emperor. The great void sword embryo could withstand it easily without any cracks. Even when he reached the peak of the demigod realm, he still couldn't reach the limit of the great void sword embryo. This showed how mysterious the great void sword embryo was. Now, a fragment of the great void sword embryo appeared in the Tianjiao Grand Competition. It seems that I'm determined to get it, Tianyang muttered to himself. When he got the fragment of the great void sword embryo in the 9-universe sky ruins, the power of the great void sword embryo had increased tremendously. Now, the great void sword embryo could still withstand Tianyang's full outburst. However, if he could get a stronger sword, Tianyang would be more than happy to do it. At this moment, the envoy of the Territory Lord raised his eyebrows as he noticed the change in Tianyang. Could it be that something among the hundreds of semi-divine weapons had attracted his interest? However, these things were taken out after being checked by the Territory Lord, so there was no possibility of him picking them up. Maybe there's something suitable for him. The envoy of the territory lord shook his head and skipped over this matter. Then he shouted softly, "Everyone, get back to your positions." The next moment, the remaining 25 people all stopped what they were doing. Next, it's not a one-on-one battle in the arena, the envoy of the territory lord said. Hearing this, everyone was stunned again. The last round had already changed a lot. This third round should also be a one-on-one arena battle. Why did it change again? Saint Ching, Z, and Heaven Oracle's expressions changed slightly, but the others were still confused. However, he could only nod silently. The next round will be similar to the first round. It will be a chaotic battle. However, in this chaotic battle, we won't be able to see the scene of many cultivators ganging up on one person in the first round. The Realm Master said indifferently. Hearing this, the corners of everyone's mouth twitched. It seemed that the fact that nearly 30 people had besieged Tianyang in the first round and were instantly killed by Tianyang made things difficult for the Realm Lord. However, most people were still expressionless, waiting for the Realm Lord's envoy to continue reading. Although it is said that multiple people cannot besiege one person, a single person can besiege multiple people. If someone makes the first move against multiple people, then it's allowed for multiple people to surround and attack one person. The Realm Lord Emissary said again. Hearing this, the eyes of the remaining disciples of the Heavenly Cloud Palace lit up. If many people surrounded one person, then that person would definitely counterattack. In that case, wouldn't it be the same as besieging one person? My spirit is not weak. If anyone tries to besiege me first, regardless of strength or status, they will be expelled from the Heaven Pride competition and automatically placed at the bottom. The Realm Lord's envoy said coldly. Everyone's expression turned serious. The Yuan spirit cultivation of everyone present was far from reaching the spirit realm. It was basically impossible to hide from the Realm Master Emissary who had the cultivation of the God Realm and the power of the Divine Soul. However, the only remaining person of the Zhongshuan demon sect twitched his face slightly. He unconsciously looked at Tianyang. If it was spirit versus spirit, then the result would be different. However, after hearing the rules, everyone's expression relaxed. In that case, who will want to fight 1 against 3, 1 against 4, or even more? Those who were able to stay here were all top geniuses of the Lingfeng realm. Although there was a gap between them, it was definitely not twice as big. For example, no matter how strong Saint Ching was, it was impossible for him to fight 2G Minkai. In the end, it was still a one-on-one battle, which was similar to the previous one-on-one battles. However, no one noticed. After hearing the rules, the corners of Tianyang's mouth curled up. One could fight 1 against many, but not one more? 25 people fighting at the same time? Wouldn't that be the best venue in the Heaven Domain? Then, let the third round of the Heaven Pride competition begin. The Realm Lord's envoy shouted. Then, his figure flashed, and he left the huge battle stage. In the next moment, the look in the eyes of the 25 people suddenly changed. Still, no one dared to be the first to challenge the strongest. However, this time, Li Xuanzong was missing and Haomenyang Tian was added to the list. Everyone else had a grave expression. However, Feng Wuji circulated the power of destiny and enveloped everyone except Tianyang and Saint Ching. He didn't know why, but he had a bad premonition. The great void sword embryo in Tianyang's hand suddenly bloomed with dazzling light. Then the Tianshao sword attached to it. The origin of chaos and the 9-colored Xingguang erupted at the same time. The peak demigod true origin that he had just retracted was released again. Then, a terrifying devouring force erupted in all directions, with Tianyang as the center. What? The geniuses who had just started the battle were stunned and looked at Tianyang. What was Haomenyang Tian, who had defeated Li Xuanzong and become one of the 3 heaven prides of the Lingfeng realm, try to do now? Tianyang, on the other hand, exhaled deeply. Beams of the 9-colored Xingguang were released around him. Following it, wisps of devouring force burst out from his body. Boom! There was only ordinary heaven and earth spiritual energy and nothing else in the battle space. The heaven and earth spiritual energy, which wasn't much to begin with, was forcibly torn out by the devouring force. It was injected into Tianyang's body. Tianyang's peak demigod true origin had dissipated quite a bit, but now it had expanded countless times. In an instant, he had stepped into the peak demigod realm, and even went one step further. At this moment, everyone was stunned as they looked at Tianyang. What was he trying to do with such a huge commotion? Saint Ching looked at Tianyang with a grave expression. He had a bad feeling about this. In the next moment, 10 rays of light lit up around heavenly Sunday. This time, it wasn't part of the battle against Li Xuanzang. Instead, the heaven realm had completely erupted. It's over. Boom. The heaven god's wrath that covered the entire battle arena fell. End of chapter.